When did you witness a crime being committed by someone who had no clue what they were doing? When I worked at Hollywood Video, before that evil corporation went out of business, finally, a man came into my store and bought one bag of popcorn. When I opened the register, he pulled out a box cutter from his pocket and told me to give him all the money. My first reaction was to laugh. I couldn't believe I was being robbed. Then he waved the box cutter around and swore he wasn't horsing around, to which I told him he wasn't getting anything. He said he'd cut me, and I told him good luck climbing over the counter to get to me. He then placed his hands on the counter and leaned towards me. I grabbed a box cutter of my own and said, "Well, would you look at that? A Mexican standoff." Now, here's where it gets silly. The man asked if I was threatening him. I said, "No, sir," still laughing at the situation. He proclaimed he was calling the police, and I said, "Please do." He did, and then he waited for the police to arrive. He told them I brandished a box cutter and threatened his life. I then showed the fine officer our security footage, and wouldn't you know it, he arrested my new friend. That's my favorite work story. Call it bullcrap if you want. I worked at a bowling alley in high school. We had a guy climb up into the ceiling in the restroom and wait until we were closed so that he could climb down and rob it. Not only did he not get any money because everything was locked in a gigantic safe from the 1930s that probably weighed over 1,000 pounds, but the guy couldn't even get out of the building. All the steel fire doors were padlocked on the outside, and I guess he didn't want to risk being seen smashing the glass on the front doors, since it was right by a busy road. Our wannabe criminal did the only logical thing, which was to go back to the bar and drink all night. The manager found him passed out on the floor when he opened up in the morning. An Aussie guy I knew was out drinking in Canada with another Aussie mate. His mate left early to go back to the flat they were sharing in Vancouver, and they were accosted in a dark alley by two men with knives. Being absolutely sloshed off his face, he failed to pick up on the man's intent, or their knives, and simply pushed them aside saying, "Yeah, nah, sorry mate, I'm Australian," and continued to F off home. The poor fellow later realized he'd just brushed off two armed muggers by telling them he was Australian and ignoring them. There were two guys from my high school that robbed a little convenience store. They had ski masks and gats, and the robbery went pretty smoothly for them. But they also decided to wear their Letterman coats with their names on the back. They were later arrested. Maybe they were that dumb, but I'd also say that there was a non-zero chance that those guys got framed by other people who knew what they were doing with their disguises. Although I suppose the police would do their due diligence and such. But can you imagine getting your high school bully back by wearing a Letterman jacket with their name on it while you rob a place? Back when I worked at Walmart, one of the best laughs I ever got while working there was watching two middle-aged women run into the store, grab about 50 of those Visa gift cards from the rack, then run out of the store laughing while they did it. You have to activate them. They're completely worthless without being activated. I bet those ladies were pretty upset when they realized they'd just stolen a crapload of nothing. I was parked in the far end of a parking lot of a 24-hour grocery store, sitting in the driver's seat, checking a few emails and letting my window defrost. I had the window rolled down just a tiny bit, basically enough for someone to fit their arm through if they really tried. That's relevant very soon. A guy approached from the back, so I heard him and looked that way. He tells me to get out of the car. The door is locked and he's holding a knife towards the window. He doesn't have a firearm. I just kind of look at him and say, "No," with a confused look. My firearm is in my shoulder holster, but my coat is buttoned up. He awkwardly tries to open the door, can't, and then actually sticks his arm through the tiny part of the window that's rolled down. I immediately hit the button and roll it up, so he's just stuck there, screaming in pain and pounding on the window with his other hand. He finally drops the knife, so I let the window down a bit, and he runs off. In college, I worked as a loss prevention guy for one of the big boxes. You know, sit in a little room and watch cameras to catch shoplifters. We were having a problem with customers' wallets being stolen out of the men's fitting rooms. The victim would go in, try on a new pair of pants, come out to show his wife, and then when he went back to the fitting room, his wallet would be gone. So one afternoon, I get a call from the sales staff about a fight in the men's fitting room. I run down there to find a 6'2" black guy with a 5'2" white guy in a headlock. The black guy caught the white guy coming out of his room with his wallet. Turns out the black guy's wallet was his secret service badge and credentials. Whoops! A few weeks ago, I was getting home from late night classes when this guy jumps out and says, "Give me all your money," or something like that. The problem is, he has no weapon. No shooter, no knife, he wasn't even a threatening-looking guy. I just sort of walked past him back to my dorm. The guy keeps at it until we get near my dorm. He gets in front of the door and demands my money. I pick up a rusted pipe that's always near the door and he backs off. Laziest criminal ever. I had a chav do a similar thing, but he wouldn't let me past him. I'd just gotten off the train, I was tired and irritated by the 4-hour journey, so I wasn't in the mood. He follows me until we get to an underpass before jumping in front of me. I want to get into the underpass and he won't let me, he's demanding money. Now the problem with chavs is they don't weigh much, and I've been doing martial arts for years, so I'm strong for a girl. The guy ends up on his bum as I push him out the way and keep walking. People around me just kind of look and carry on walking themselves. A friend of my cousin went to a Circle K in a small town and went to buy alcohol. He then went to the counter, they asked for ID so he could purchase, obviously. He showed them and then put them at weapon point and said he was robbing them. Stupidest kid ever, and he was mega caught. I think he's still in jail on several charges. This wasn't really a stupid criminal, more of a gentleman robber, I'd say. I went out at like 2 in the morning to buy cigs. I tried a few shops, but they were all closed. Walking home in sorrow, I was accosted by a young man with a knife who asked quite politely for all of my money. I was a very poor backpacker at the time, and the $50 in my pocket was pretty much the last of my money for the month. I showed the guy my empty wallet, hoping he'd leave it at that, but he noticed my bus pass and decided to take that instead. He then handed me 2 cigarettes and apologized for the inconvenience and walked away. In a state of semi-shock, I realized that without my bus pass, I had no way of getting the 5 a.m. bus to work, because of the damn Vancouver transport company, and I expressed my frustration out loud. The guy came back and asked me what was wrong. After I explained, he handed me back my bus pass and said, "Well, we've all got to make a living somehow." My favorite part is where he asks what's wrong. "Hey man, what's wrong?" "Oh, I just got robbed like 2 seconds ago." "Oh, jeez, I'm so sorry. Here, take this bus pass." A couple of people broke into my storage facility once. They cut through the fence and were going through units when they realized there was a camera mounted near them pointed right where they were standing. They panicked, covered their faces up, and decided to get rid of the camera. They climbed on something and started trying to tear the camera down. While they were doing this, there was nothing covering their faces anymore, and they were literally staring into the lens of the camera no more than 3 feet away. Guy comes into my store, purchases an item with a $100 bill, and I give him his change. He says, "That's not enough change," and reaches across the counter into the register drawer to try and grab back the $100 he gave me. So I slam the drawer in his fingers. The end. Cha-ching, motherfricker, except my drawer won't close. I once foiled a clever plan by an elderly guy at the department store I used to work at. He had a blazer with countless hidden pockets, and he was filling them with bottles of oil of Olay moisturizer. The loss prevention guy called me to help corner him. As he was leaving the door, he saw that I was looking at him and started to run. We ran after him, and he looked back at us. That's where he messed up. He tripped over his own feet and fell like a sack of potatoes. Most of the moisturizer bottles exploded, and he was lubed neck to knee. He smelled fantastic, though. You know, if he was spry enough to get up and start running again, I've got to wager it would be really hard to get a hold of him to properly stop him. And if he was elderly, all of that moisturizer might have had a nice de-aging effect on his skin, even if his hip was shattered by the fall. I had a drunk guy try to steal a bottle of vodka that we wouldn't sell him. He grabbed it off the poor cashier and just ran for the door. Fairly standard tactic. What he did, however, was stop in the door to taunt us with his brilliant scheme, literally turned in the door to stop and go, "Woo!" and gave us the finger. Whereupon he was hit in the chest by the security guard and Big Rab, the 6'5" guy who stocks the alcohol aisle. He managed to scramble away from them and down the car park ramp, however. It was a real shame because our car park ends in a 15-foot-high fence to stop people from climbing over it onto the railway tracks on the other side. Utter frickin' moron. His girlfriend didn't even wait with him, she just bought her stuff and left. This one actually happens a lot, but it happened to me one night several years ago during a graveyard shift. I was working alone on a Sunday night at the gas station. Now, this wasn't a bad area, but it wasn't great either, so the general manager figured that they didn't need 2 people watching the store. I disagreed with him, but I digress. I was in the back of the store mopping, doing my best to keep an eye out for people approaching the store so I could run back to the registers before they got inside. Anyway, I was mopping when a van suddenly pulls up in reverse to the store. Just as I start to put the mop aside, literally no more than 2 seconds afterwards, the doors to the back open up and 2 guys with sweaters tied around their heads jump out the back. They rush inside the store, yelling, run up to the counter, grab both of the teller machines and rip out the power cords, running out of the store with their loot and jumping in the back of the van. It speeds off and they hit the road. All of this happened in about 20 seconds and I just stood there and frickin' watched it. What these idiots didn't realize is that the frickin' machines are separated from the cash drawer for this very reason. They effectively made off with $0, but they did me a favor because I didn't have to work for the next 2 days, since the store couldn't operate until they got the new machines in. In short, idiot thieves stole inconsequential registers, thinking they were getting the money in the drawer under the counters with them. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Worked as a cashier for a grocery store, a customer came and placed a random assortment of things up on my register. Candy, soda, a couple of kids' toys, a pre-cooked chicken from the deli. She mentioned to me that she was from Oregon and would like the tax removed. We can do that in Washington state for customers from specific states. To do this, she had to give me her ID so I could record the info on it before removing the tax from the transaction. After giving her her total, she said she'd like to pay with a check. She was filling it out and I noticed it was pre-signed. I asked whose check they were and if they were available to come sign the check in front of me. She said they belonged to her mum who was in the car. When she left, I saw her get in the passenger seat of a van and leave, so I took down the license plate as they drove off. After this all happened, I called my floor manager over and told him what happened. We both shrugged and basically said, weird, leaving it at that. Later that day, the loss prevention guy calls me up the stairs, which is normally never a good thing. He tells me that I'd made a good catch because 2 women had been going around town with a stolen book of checks, and I was the reason the cops had an ID and a license plate to go after. In short, a lady gave me her ID to prove she deserved a 78-cent discount on goods she intended to pay for with stolen checks. I was summoned to court to tell this story to a judge. I work at my family's liquor store, and we have a debit and credit card machine where we take the card, punch in our store ID, cashier ID, then the amount, stick the card in, and then hand it back. This one fellow comes in and grabs a 6-pack from the cooler and comes to the counter. He was the only other person in the store besides a random guy in a corner going through wine. So I ring the 6-pack in and then I saw him grab it. He came up to the till and I asked him how he was doing and he said, fine, and I told him his total as he was just pulling up to the till and he mumbled something and reached into his coat and pulled out a gat and placed it on the counter with the barrel facing me and slid it a few inches forward. Due to being used to people doing that with credit or debit cards, I just stretched out and grabbed the weapon with one hand and the debit machine in the other, automatically. He wasn't holding on to the weapon very firmly, so I just pulled it away, and then I realized I'd grabbed it and it was a gat, not a credit card. So I froze with his weapon in my hand and the debit machine in the other. We looked each other in the eye and then he bolted, leaving the shooter behind. I called my uncle and then the cops, who came and took a statement and afterwards told me that the weapon was empty, so I wasn't in any real danger, but it's still one of the funniest things to ever happen to me. The level of non-committal to this crime really speaks of someone who didn't feel great about committing it. I wonder how desperate this guy was. It was sort of adorable how awkward and inept this went down in the end. Thanks for writing in. I work in a car audio store. This gangster wannabe shows up wanting us to install his amplifier right now. All of my installers are busy and I tell him it isn't going to happen today, but we could probably do it tomorrow. He gets all upset and tells me his boy will install it himself, all he needs is the wires. I show him our amp kits and he picks one out and pays with a credit card and shows me his ID, which is good. So the next thing I see is this fool grabbing a box with some entry-level 12-inch woofers and running out of the door and throwing the box into his ride and peeling out of our parking lot. The store was pretty crowded and more than a few customers saw what just went down and asked if they could chase the guy down. I couldn't believe this idiot just paid with a credit card and I checked his name and ID and it matched, so I had all the information I needed to have him arrested. But I said, oh, hell no. I just wrote up a ticket and manually punched the card for 3 times the amount, something like $585, instead of $170 for the thing he stole. The charge got approved and was never contested either. I hope he enjoys his speakers. Last week, I just left Qdoba when I saw a kid walk up to a skateboarder and attempt to steal his board. The first kid was followed by 2 of his friends, both of whom were shouting, "Hector, it's not your board, let it go!" Hector did not let go until the 5 cops who were in Qdoba came out and arrested him. They were parked outside. He was not a clever young lad. My dad was in a bank and some guy tried to rob the place. Dad noticed the guy's weapon and told him to shoot him. The guy wouldn't do it after constant demand by my dad and left the place. He'd tried to rob the place with a plastic weapon. Easy way to save the day. Good on you, Dad. Some creepy-looking guy tried to carjack me. I was leaving the supermarket at 8 in the morning on my way through Rotorua to go to Wellington. He knocks on my window and I roll it down about an inch. He asks if I can give him a ride to some gas station. I'm not too familiar with the place, so I ask where it is and he points up the road. Then he tells me I can just drop him at the corner of this street about 100 meters away. I laughed and told him to walk. Then he tried to force his way into my car, a 1973 Mercedes, so I opened the door as hard as I could into him and slammed it shut on his fingers. These doors weigh like 80 kilos. I know this because I had to take them off to fix some rust around the hinges. I do feel a bit bad for possibly breaking his fingers. My sister used to work at a bank in a Walmart, and her coworker had this somewhat older pickup truck, about 15 years old at the time of the story. It was pretty unremarkable in every way. Stock parts, stock stereo, average looking. Some idiot punched out the driver's side window and stole a CD player, which didn't play past track 7 on any given CD. Mind you, it was stock and also 15 years old. Instead of disconnecting the plugs like a normal thief, he cut all the wires, making it a stolen CD player that now required repair. He also bled all over the inside of the truck because he punched the window in and proceeded to wrap his hand up in one of the girl's spare work shirts. After taking the CD player, he then walks into Walmart and tries to steal a TV. Not one of the newer TVs that only weighs like 25 pounds, a big tube TV that weighs like 80. When he walked out, the alarm went off. He told the person at the door that it was a return and he was simply taking his old one back to his car. Keep in mind that he still had a bloody bank teller's polo wrapped around his hand that had an employee's name on it. An employee who was working at the store at that moment. Of course, the friend and the store pressed charges. The friend was also offered an appearance on one of those judge TV shows, but declined because the case was too stupid. For a daytime judge show. I have a weird take on this question because my Denny's was too inept to be robbed. A man walked in and went to the podium and cash stand. He said he had a weapon and wanted the money in the drawer. The first waitress sighed in disgust and said, "I'm not even on the register," and just walked away. The second waitress was standing nearby and looked at her husband, sitting in the nearest table, and mouthed, "Call the cops." And the husband says at regular volume, "I don't even have my cell phone on me." At this point, the robber decides that maybe this isn't the best route and begins to flee. They caught him about 1/10 of a mile away, on foot. Does anybody remember box tops? For those who don't, they're small squares on the tops of boxes of food that if you cut out and bring to an elementary school, that school gets 10 cents per box top. When I was young, still in elementary, a kid in my class stole the class's stash of box tops because he wanted the money for himself. So stupid. Not really a crime, but I figure it fits. This actually just happened to me this morning in my cab. Had a really young, snobby guy in the taxi, first year at university, I guess. He was pretty wasted and fairly nasty. Got to his parents' house in a decent area of town, and he had no money on him, so nipped inside to get some. Back and forward various times, still no money, all the time giving me a whole bunch of verbal abuse. Finally, he coughed up just over half the fare. "That'll have to do for you," he said. "You can call the police if you want, but I doubt they'd waste their time on chasing up a few extra pounds in a well-to-do middle-class area such as this. Go on, toddle on then." He added, motioning for me to leave. And I did. As I drove away, he stood triumphantly in his doorway, a broad smile on his face and his middle finger extended proudly in my direction, completely oblivious to the fact that minutes earlier he had handed his iPhone over as collateral. You can occasionally feel bad for some of these other criminals if they're resorting to their poorly orchestrated crimes out of desperation rather than a need to be a gangster, but these rich jerks who just feel entitled to other people's time without paying the proper due? Screw them. I hope you keep losing phones until you inherit a sense of decency, dude. I work part-time in a grocery store that's robbed all of the gosh darn time. Like seriously, once or twice every month. It's got to the point where now I just laugh every time I arrive at work to see the store has been broken into again. One particular night, just before we were beginning to close, a brazen robber runs into the store who appears to be no older than 20 with a cricket bat and nervously demands the money from the register. The clerk obeys and gives the man just under $200. The reward hardly seems proportional to the potential ramifications. At this point, the customers at the front end are backing away and the man attempts to make an escape. As he breaks for the door, while I'm standing in an adjacent aisle where the soup pleasantly happened to be shelved, I grabbed a big old can of tomato soup and gave it a friendly toss in the vicinity of his face. K.O. Slam dunk, hole in one. He takes a comical fall into the flower display in a glorious explosion of flowers and water. Then, every male customer jumps on the jerk and pins him down until the cops arrive. In short, I threw a can of soup at a robber and became a superhero. So I worked at a restaurant a few years back. I used to work behind the bar every once in a while. This guy was up there buying drink after drink, probably got his tab up to about $65. I remember the guy getting up. I figured he was going to the bathroom or something, but he just never came back. About an hour or so after that, a busboy found a wallet on the ground right under the seat he was sitting at. I take out the license to see if it was the guy, and it was. I saw a credit card in there and I charged it. He still hasn't returned for the wallet.
People whose work brings them into other people's homes. What stuff have you seen? I once delivered pizza to a falcon tamer whose falcon was just chilling with him on the porch. That was exciting. As most of these stories will feature tales of hoarding, I'll give you a story with a bit of a twist. I'm a plumber by trade, and although most of my work is with processing plants and factories, occasionally our boss will do a favor for a project manager or other high-level contact. We were asked to go and install a RO system, it's a type of water purification system, at someone's country home. Most people have no need for water that pure. A filtration system and UV treatment is way more than enough, but if the client wants to pay for it, then he gets what he wants. So me and my coworker drive to this guy's house in the middle of nowhere. It's a pretty standard-looking house and nothing out of the ordinary. We go inside, and he brings us down to the basement to this big steel door and a set of steps leading further down. This guy had excavated and over the last few years built an underground bunker. Think of the place in 10 Cloverfield Lane, but this was way better built. It was still rather Spartan, as there was no furniture yet, but this place was massive, possibly about 5,000 square foot of living space. There was an air filtration system that would bring fresh air in and pump it out to several spots on his property, a series of buried reservoirs to hold fresh water pumped from his well after it went through his newly installed RO. He had power from a mix of the grid and a small solar plant on the roof of his house and another in a field away from the house, as well as a backup generator. There were shelves in the walls with lights installed for growing small crops, even one room that he said will be dedicated to raising a couple of chickens. This man was geared up to survive the end of the world and had spent a ton of money to do so. I've seen a lot of preppers before, but this was a very different level of prep. I work as a technician in a pharmacy, and sometimes I'll offer to do deliveries at the end of the day if they're not too far and they missed our regular delivery guy. This one lady, who was very hard of hearing, was starting on a weekly pill organizer that we'd prepare for her, so she invited me in so I could explain it to her. Immediately, I saw two cats, who ran off very quickly and smelled a very strong odor of cat poop. I assumed there was a box in the other room that she wouldn't remember to clean and that she couldn't smell it. And when we sat down, I realized there were large carpenter ants everywhere, on the table, on the walls, on the ceiling, on the carpet, etc. She didn't even seem to notice them. There are worse stories for sure, but I'd been serving this lady for 5 years at the store and would have never suspected such a thing. I was so thankful for the fresh air I was breathing in when I left. As a guy who's personally afraid of bugs, I would have freaked out. I would have booked it out the door as soon as I saw all those ants. I'm in and out of thousands of houses every year, so I've seen a lot. One of the strangest was finding hidden cameras. The people were moving in that day, so not theirs, set up in the attic and pointing into bedrooms and bathrooms. Also in the same attic, it was a big one, was a completely furnished hidden room that was only accessible from the attic. Needless to say, the homeowners were pretty freaked out. I've mentioned these people before. I was building an addition to an existing house. The owners were a weird pair. Husband and wife. The husband looked like Gollum and the wife looked like Hagrid. They were both very slow mentally and they smelled terrible, like they bathed in pure ammonia. Even the new addition started to smell. The more we sealed it up, the more it stank, and we hadn't even opened them up to each other yet. At the time, I wasn't anybody important on the crew, so I never had any occasion to enter the house itself, until one fateful morning when I was there early. The power to the exterior outlets had been cut, and the electrician hadn't installed the new ones yet, so I decided to run an extension cord from inside the house. I opened the back door intended to become a hallway entrance, and the smell nearly knocked me over. It was like the ammonia smell that clung to them, but ramped to 100 times. Breathing shallowly through my mouth, I ventured into the dimly lit interior. The living room, or at least I think it was the living room, was a literal maze of containers, cages, 18 inches tall and a couple feet square, all stacked one on top of the other. As my eyes adjusted, I thought they were filled with rabbits. The ones by the door were stacked such that I could see over them. Elsewhere and against the walls, they were stacked to the ceiling, each and every one of them with an occupant. I stepped closer. Not rabbits. Cats. Hundreds of cats. Each cage containing at least one, some 2 or 3, each stacked 4 or 5 high, nothing under them, each one urinating and defecating on the cage below. I got the heck out of there. I really hope those cats are okay. Worked as an apprentice to a private contractor for a year before going back to school. The worst was when we were working in a woman's home, getting it ready to be sold. We were painting her son's room, and we had to move the furniture to the middle of the room to cover it up with a tarp to avoid messes. As we moved the bed, we found the kid's heroin stash, complete with dirty needles in an open cardboard box. Kid was about 16. We didn't say anything to anyone, just slid the box under the moved bed and went to work. We were pretty glad to be out of that place ASAP though. Along with the kid, his single mother definitely seemed to be tweaking at points, and looking back on it, I suspect she was an addict as well. On the other hand, the best job we had was a 6-month job that started as a front entryway reno for a woman who had recently lost her husband. When we started, she kept to herself and spent most of the days in her room. She had some medical issues that prevented her from working, and was clearly very depressed. The entryway renovation became a living room, and then kitchen, and then basement, and eventually a whole home renovation inside and out. The woman kept finding new things she wanted done. In the process of all this, she started to heal, and by the end of the job, she was always out in the living room or kitchen chatting away with us and feeding us and taking care of us. The last day of work was only a 2-hour cleanup, after which she took us out to lunch to thank us for the renovation and, more importantly, helping her overcome the depression that she was dealing with. I love that lady. And I love her too. I'm so glad that that story had a good ending. I used to work on foreclosed homes as an inspector of sorts. I remember we went to one foreclosed house where all the windows were painted black. Inside were these massive wooden stands with the fluorescent lights and nothing else. I don't even think any of the appliances were left. The thing that gets me to this day, though, about this house was that the people growing weed there thought painting the windows black would be a good idea, because that's not suspicious at all. I'm in nursing/mental health. Some of the more memorable things I saw were during my student placements many years ago. For instance, one older guy I visited was a bit odd. As he was talking, I was scanning the room and see these framed photos of him from decades ago. He was in full blackface in them. Why he proudly displayed these photos, I don't know. Also, as a student, I encountered what I believe was a case of spousal Munchausen by proxy. The client was bedbound and had been for decades following a vehicle accident. She was skin and bones, couldn't communicate, and had some type of fungal infection covering her skin. The husband watched her like a hawk and didn't leave the nurse and I alone for a moment. Very controlling, yet played up the carer role. It just didn't seem genuine, and I suspect he was getting secondary gains from the years of sympathy in his role, hence my belief it was a case of MBP. There was also some other guy living in the house who just stood around and watched us like a creep. When we got in the car after the visit, both the nurse and I agreed it was extremely disturbing. Nowadays I'm in psych and the things I see don't faze me. Carpet installer for 30 years. The list is endless. Some highlights. Full-on woohoo dungeon in the basement. NYC male prostitute with custom wallpaper. Silver drawings of gay woohoo on black background. Did several buildings for a developer. Later saw him on the front page of the paper getting arrested for kidnapping/extortion. He was Russian mafia. Have showed up to find piles, not one pile, piles of dog crap all over the house. A secret computer lab in a bazillion-dollar home behind a bookcase, down a long concrete hallway, and a giant steel door. Sounds like he's Batman. Had the power company running an underground line outside the home I was working in. They hit the water main for the entire area. Guy had a water spout in his front yard like Old Faithful, only it didn't stop until they dug up his entire yard and the water had destroyed the entire bottom of his house. He was at work, had no idea it was happening. I could go on. You don't have to go on. That's enough. That's plenty. I don't typically go into other people's houses. I'm a mechanic who does house calls, which occasionally brings me inside to wash my hands or use the bathroom. The best one was when I was doing a job for a man who broke down at his girlfriend's house. After the job was done, I asked to go inside to wash my hands and he says it's fine. I'm washing my hands at the sink and suddenly this naked black woman comes out of a room and gives me a confused look. Who are you? What are you doing in my house? I'm the mechanic. You can't be the mechanic. You're a woman. Person I worked on the vehicle for. Must be cheating with me. With a white girl at that. What has this world come to? Well, to be fair, I'm not white, I'm mixed, and I assure you I am indeed the mechanic. No, women cannot be mechanics, and I don't care what you are. So the strangest thing I've ever seen on a house call was an overly paranoid, mildly sexist, naked black woman. I tried to calm her down, but it didn't work. Apparently the guy got dumped that night and it was all my fault. I now ask for a host to wash my hands. Geesh, I really hope that guy finds a better girlfriend. I clean houses. One client has us clean once a week. If it lands on the floor, it stays there until we clean it up. Her youngest child is still in diapers. There are usually dirty diapers around the house completely filled with pee. Her bed sheets always have crumbs from her kids eating in her bed. There have been skid marks on her sheets and duvet cover. They have 5 trash cans in their kitchen so they don't have to worry about taking the trash out. Her kids play with toothpaste and toothbrushes so we find globs of toothpaste all over the house. My boss has once gone to make the bed, pulled the sheets back, and found a huge pink adult toy, and the mirror-sided nightstand was covered in lube. I think the wrong thing was lubed up there. Working in financial services here with insurance and investments. While I've seen a whole slew of different stuff between new and old clients, probably the most interesting aspect of the job is seeing people who make really good money for themselves but live well within, and sometimes below, their means. One particular case was a young guy in his early 30s who had accumulated quite a bit of wealth, was making upwards of $85,000 a year plus bonuses, and was living in a rather run-down apartment in a bad side of town. Roaches, leaky ceiling, the works. And he wasn't looking to upgrade his living situation. Ended up being one of my favorite clients. Super nice guy, level head. We play golf on the weekends sometimes still. 4! Used to deliver furniture, so boy do I have some good stories. Number 1. A lady had mannequins everywhere in her house, all of them dressed up in fancy clothes and in various positions. Some sitting in the living room watching TV, one in the kitchen with an apron cooking, 2 at the dinner table, 1 sitting on the edge of her bed, and best of all, 1 on the toilet downstairs. It was very strange. The lady dressed in very bright clothes with very red lipstick, and her eyebrows always made her look very surprised. Number 2. This delivery was in a run-down old neighborhood that was in a very wooded area. Being there just gave me the creeps. I was putting together a bed frame upstairs and looked downstairs through an open air vent and saw that the garage area had freezers lining the walls and a little workshop with a meat grinder and a bunch of tools in the middle. I think it was the fastest I ever assembled that particular bed frame. Noped right out of there, but I did get a $20 tip, so I never mentioned it to anyone until now. Number 3. This time, I was delivering a bedroom set to a nice lady in an apartment complex. Walked into her apartment, and there was no furniture anywhere except a mattress on a simple bed frame in her bedroom with a TV in front of it, and a mirror on the ground in her living room with a laptop and webcam on a chair. When taking her old mattress out, she had several adult toys under her bed, all of them over 10 inches long and girthy. I think you can guess what her job was. Number 4. There was a lady who ordered furniture online, which was unusual because it was such a small business. We arrived with a Cali king-sized bed, and the woman was bedridden and well over 500 pounds. Who answered the door, you might ask? Her husband, who must have weighed 150 pounds soaking wet. They used some pulley system they had installed to pick her up off the bed a few inches, and we swapped beds with her looming over us watching TV. Her husband was cool though. In the office downstairs next to the door, he had a sweet battle station. 4 monitors, a beast of a computer, TV, sweet chair, mini fridge. Apparently she was a trust fund baby, and he was riding the gravy train all the way to Steam HQ. Number 5. Delivered furniture to a nice gentleman one week, and he had pictures of him and his family everywhere. 3 weeks later, we deliver again, and I noticed in all of the pictures, the wife's face was cut out, but the pictures were put back on the walls. Guess that explains the lazy boy. Number 6. Last one. We were given keys to a family's house and asked to deliver and assemble while they weren't home. Not unusual, surprisingly. We get there and start putting their 2 twin-size bed frames together, and next thing we know, we hear 2 people going at it hard in the next room. Seriously, they were getting it, shaking stuff on the walls and everything. They finished before we were done, and 2 15-ish-year-old kids walk out. Turns out he decided to skip school with his girlfriend. Go Timmy! He tipped us $10 to not say anything to his parents or our manager. Former door-to-door salesman checking in. Sold subscriptions for TV and internet. Once tried to sell a lady, read, probably serial killer, whose house was filled with literally thousands of porcelain dolls of all shapes, sizes, styles, and degrees of scariness. Gotta have some variety. She had everything from pristine dolls that looked like they'd never been touched to Annabelle-tier filthy monstrosities that honest to God looked straight out of a horror movie, and these dolls were everywhere. Also, her floors and what I could see of the walls were painted red. Super creepy. 10 out of 10 would almost get murder again. I think the only thing missing from that was a spectacular la 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 in the background. I used to work in door-to-door sales, so I saw quite a lot of stuff. One time I knocked on a door and the screen door was shut, but the door behind was wide open and I could see right down the hallway into the house. This guy, who I can only assume was waiting for someone else, literally jumped around the corner at the end of the hallway, bollock naked, locked eyes with me and screamed and hid around the corner again. He very awkwardly asked why I was there and I explained, in between fits of laughter, and said I'd leave him to it and hope he had a great day. Another time, a guy opened the door at 11:30 a.m. holding a bottle of Jack Daniels that he was drinking from and invited me in. He had 3 teeth and no shirt on. I politely declined. Back in the early 90s, I spent 2 summers from college working at a little mom-and-pop appliance and electronics store. I helped with the deliveries. Plenty of experiences very similar to what has been posted here. Hoarders, filthy homes, too many pet smells, etc. Most memorable, though, was when we delivered a huge projection TV, remember those? To this guy's finished basement. This dude's basement was straight out of the 70s in every way. On the table in front of the big sectional couch was a freaking mountain of weed. I guess he and his old lady were in the process of packaging it up for sales. You'd think he'd have it cleaned up a bit before we got there. We called to let them know we were on the way. Both myself and my partner were really hoping to be tipped with a couple of buds once we had the TV set up. Nope. C'est la vie. Another memorable delivery was a whole truckload of appliances to Tony Soprano's house, or at least it might as well have been. Once all the appliances are set up and it's time for us to settle up the bill, the guy takes us into his home office, pulls a painting off the wall revealing a safe behind it. opens the safe, which is jam-packed with cash. You honestly could fit more cash into the thing. He starts peeling off hundreds from a stack and throws me and the other guys a couple hundred for a tip. Biggest tip by a long shot. I think the thing that surprised me the most when I started my job was the amount of clutter in so many homes. Rich, poor, young, or old. Hoarding, clutter, and pet smells are prevalent everywhere. The worst I've seen is an older man living in a one-room efficiency-style home. Takeout containers molded to the floor inches thick, soda and whiskey bottles 2 feet deep in the middle of the room. The toilet had obviously never been cleaned and was completely stained brown inside and out with feces and urine. The floor around it was the same from an old drunk who didn't care where anything landed. The smell was obviously really bad, and I was just glad that it was winter when I went in there. He apologized for living, quote, like a bachelor. On my first call at this one client, he answered the door in an open bathroom, under which he was naked. He and I stared at each other for a long moment in pretty mutual shock before he finally tied the bathrobe closed, mumbled something, and ran away, to get clothes as it turned out. He came back, he apologized, I fixed the client's very expensive computer and left. I brought this incident up to my boss, who said, very offhandedly, that this gentleman did that often. It was apparently his way of hazing new techs, and he was only shocked because they had sent a female technician. On the upside, the embarrassment seemed to break him of the habit, since I never heard of him doing it again. Why my boss didn't warn me, I have no idea. Silver lining, at least the hazing stops. I work as an insulator who does work for low-income houses. So I showed up to this house. First thing I noticed is about 30 lawn chairs with stuffed animals sitting in them with their own tools. Old rusty tools. And these stuffed animals weren't in the best condition. So when I finally get up to his door, I knock. He opens up, starts drooling like crazy, obviously heavily medicated. It took a little while to explain why I was there. When I finally did, I started drilling holes around the house and boom, got to the garage. There were about 300 stuffed animals hung with string nooses in their missing arms and eyes and all sorts of stuff. Needless to say, I got out of there as fast as I could. Alright, strap in for this one. This one's scary. The kids were playing Minecraft Pocket Edition on their TV, back when they didn't have all the good updates that made it more like the PC version. Creative mode didn't have very many usable items. It was horrifying. I was a licensed pet sitter. As a disclaimer, I loved my job for the most part, and the clients were great to me, but I had some interesting experiences. I worked for a lady who had no less than 24 cats. It was a one-story house with a giant outdoor fenced-in cat area attached to the house and an outdoor cat house, which was basically a closed-in shed surrounded by a metal fence with cat houses and food. All cats were indoor or cat house cats, besides one who was fed outside in a bush. I was not to let any of the cats out of the house or the outdoor cat shed. Her house gave me the absolute chills because it was basically just a kitchen, a laundry room, and 2 nearly empty rooms with a torn-up rug and a glass door. Cats creeping in on you from every corner of the house. She fed them all canned cat food, fancy feast, all 24 of them, with cardboard plates left in random places around the house. Her cupboards were full of canned cat food from top to bottom. She had one outdoor cat that she just fed outside. It sat on my rug and stared at me during the meeting with the owner. It was kind of cute, though. I knocked on the door and someone said, "Come in." I tried, but the door was locked. I knocked again and heard, "Come in." I tried again and the door was still locked. Turned out to be the family's parrot. I once saw a woman that had built a massive castle the length of a typical bed for her bunny rabbit. It was as high as the ceiling and it had a moat and everything. That's just impressive. Oh boy, gotta do this relatively frequently. I work in mental health, so a lot of homes I go into just reek of mental illness from the outside in. Messy, dirty, and chaotic-looking homes are a big indicator of mental health issues. Some houses I've ventured into have this strong odor coming from a variety of things like uncared-for pets, dirty laundry, old food, and just general human stench. Almost always, there is both trash and clothes all over the floor, broken stuff everywhere. Because it's kids I work with, most times there are holes in walls and property damage caused by said kid when enraged. Girls typically leave sanitary pads or tampon cartridges, sometimes used, on the floor. I've seen bugs and bug traps because they're infesting the home. Went into a house once where I found out later that it was infested with scabies. Obviously, I was super paranoid about getting them for days. One girl's stairs had nail polish staining her stairs because she threw open bottles down in a rage. Typically, there's also at least one cat, usually more. These cats don't use the litter box, or if they do, it hasn't been cleaned in so long that it's just plain disgusting. So that means the cats would just pee on the piles of clothes lying on the floor. Lots of times, the kids living there will actually put on the clothes, shoes, and socks that have previously been soiled by animals. Usually the animals are in poor health. It's really quite sad. On the outside, it's easy to tell if the house inside will be in disarray. Unkept lawns, garden overgrowth, Christmas decorations still up in June, animal poop not cleaned up. That's all I can think of for now. I've gotten home on many occasions after work and gotten directly into the shower. I think the takeaway here is keep your house clean and your mental health will be better for it. I'm a probation officer, so I have to inspect people's homes and sometimes search them. First off, countless adult toys, vibrators, butt plugs, porn, which apparently still comes in magazines? Savages. Drugs. Lots of drugs. More cash than I've ever seen in my life. Earlier this week, I pulled a shoebox out from under a bed and it was completely full of stacks of cash. Lots of homes in the more poor areas have major roach infestations, which is pretty gross. Some of the circumstances that people live in make me understand why they would want to commit crimes to make money, not that that makes it okay. Two of the worst and strangest things that come to mind. Number 1, a fishing bucket with a cast net inside of it, filled with water. I accidentally stuck my hand in the water when I grabbed the net, as you couldn't see the water. I found out later that the reason a bucket of water was in his room was because of his water-based eggplant pump. Number 2, pictures of a girl covered in blood in sexy poses. Turns out they were really into periods, and she covered herself in the blood while they were having fun and took pictures. Kind of bizarre to see until realizing where the blood came from. About a decade ago, I was working a side job cleaning chimneys. Part of the job was vacuuming out the soot once we freed up the flue. I was led into the basement by an elderly woman, and there was an entire bedroom set down there covered in plastic. It was her son's, she told me. It's waiting for him when he gets back from the war. Given the amount of dust on the plastic, coupled by her age, I think she meant Vietnam. She kept trying to give me beef stew. I said we were busy, but if she can spare any to go, I'd appreciate it. I didn't eat it, but felt like I had to take it after that. I work in pest control and once went to treat a guy's house for termites. Middle-aged Italian man and his wife's body stuffed or preserved with some crazy stuff like taxidermy just in the house. She was in a bedroom closet. It wasn't her original skin, obviously, but her skeleton with wax over it to make it look like a Madame Tussauds thing or something. Yes, he could have been kidding, but he seemed dead serious. He wasn't all there, and the figure looked like the woman in pictures all around the house, so we don't treat his place anymore.
Non-Americans, what is the most shocking thing you saw when visiting the United States? I'm Canadian, and I went on a brief road trip to the States about a month ago. The most shocking thing I experienced was how cheap the food is. We went to McDonald's and a meal for 3 people only cost about $14, and one of the meals was a salad. In Canada, one meal costs about $8. I knew the food was cheap there, but damn. Woke up early on vacation in Florida, and the sidewalk outside my hotel was absolutely covered in lizards, and it was amazing. How hard it is to get a drink. I'm Irish and over 21, and in California, even with a passport and driver's license, I was treated with skepticism. Blood started to enter my alcohol stream a few times while I was there. Ugh. Rite Aid. I can get a flu shot, HIV test, a bottle of tequila, Snickers bars, and pizza pockets all from the same store. Awesome. IHOP. I can get an entire day's worth of calories in one meal. Also, having $1 notes made me feel like I was rich. I had a huge wad of notes, but like 20 of them were $1. But still, it's a nice feeling. Speaking as a European who's visited America, this final part of the story is absolutely true. It feels special to whip out a stack of notes and slap them on the table like a mob kingpin. The first time I had to deal with TSA was enlightening. Wanted to punch the prick. Now I know that's basically normal. I'm from Singapore, and we're pretty much a conservative and reserved society. I visited the US for an elective program at UCLA, go Bruins, and the thing that struck me most about America was everyone's friendliness or socialness. People strike up a conversation with you, ask how your day's been, and really connect with each other based on what's happening around them. The weather, how long the wait for the bus is, etc. And somehow, these fleeting connections were very real and genuine to me. I came back home a much more enlightened person with my horizons very much broadened. So thank you, Americans, for showing me simple human kindness. You have to flipping drive everywhere. Again, as a person from a country with a compact built environment, this resonates with me. My cousin from Vietnam flew into America sometime in December, and she recalled that her first reaction was, "Wow, there's so much sugar covering the ground." It was snow, but she really thought we sprinkled sugar everywhere for sweets and giggles. Why she's never heard of snow, I don't know, but it was adorably hilarious. As an Australian who just came back from America this year, what the flip, man? You guys have pretzel M&Ms. Share that stuff around. Flip. I was told I speak very good English. I'm English. My neighbor Dmitri visit New York once. He say there was surprising lack of goats, which may not be bad thing. In the South, how in your face the religion was. Signs up on cafes, it being referred to a lot in conversation, and just everywhere I got confronted by religion. The patriotism as well, such as flags being up in so many yards. I had heard this, but I guess I didn't expect it to be so much like the stereotypes I imagined in my head. I found Americans insanely friendly as well, much more so than expected, and this applied to all places I went to other than New York City. I lived in China until 1999/grade 5 in elementary school, then our family moved to Dallas, Texas. Within the next year, the following things were very surprising to me. Everything is ridiculously big, from the size of our apartment to people's houses to the size of roads to the length of time it takes to get downtown. We lived in North Dallas near Arapahoe and Hillcrest. School classrooms resembled something like a wonderland. There were bright colors everywhere, tables are put together into clumps instead of ordered in neat rows from back to front. Then there were stuffed papier-mâché animals on the walls with people's names on it, cute little mailboxes for everyone, TVs and computers in every classroom, a cafeteria filled with tasty foods and snacks, and a playground with swings. We were learning 400 times 5 equals 2,000 in math class. The nice people at church actually took their religion seriously. Like, actually believed it to be real. I always thought religions were stories you learn because they were important cultural stories that had some education value, like the story of Prometheus giving fire to humans, for example. I was working at my uncle's restaurant in California when I saw a man at the bar who was looking pale and seemed to be out of it. His hands were clammy and he was not fully aware. I knew these were symptoms of a heart attack and he was unresponsive, so I called the ambulance. When the ambulance arrived, he seemed embarrassed by all of it. He did not want to go to the hospital. He asked what he would be charged for the ambulance. The paramedics then tried to convince him for about an hour to go to the hospital. He declined over and over again. I offered to drive him home, but he declined that too. This experience really hit home and made me feel for my neighbors in the United States. In Canada, people don't have to make a decision about something like this. The fact that people have to make health decisions and make their own diagnosis, prognostication, and take these kinds of risks made me really feel for people who are uninsured/uncovered. As someone who has had reconstructive labrum surgery, tonsil/adenoid removal, and several other emergency room experiences, I vowed to never complain about the medical service I receive in Canada, regardless of how long I have to wait. I got beat up real bad one time and someone called an ambulance. I tried to refuse, but they talked me into going with them to make sure I didn't have a concussion or internal bleeding. I even tried to talk them out of giving me an MRI or maybe CAT scan once I got there, since I didn't have insurance. The nurses said not to worry about that. Total bills were $7,004. Whole camps of homeless people living under highway overpasses in New Orleans. In New Orleans, those people are referred to as the middle class. I was in the M&M superstore in Times Square, and I saw a woman so fat, just so fat, she used a scooter. That's unfortunately not exceptionally unusual. I'm from Australia, and I couldn't believe how high the water levels are in your toilet. My berries nearly touched the water. Also, you drive through ATMs. Crazy. Yeah, when I went there, I suddenly realized why their toilets overflow when they get clogged. This is a very strange and alien thing to most of us outside the country. Perhaps someone can explain it. A homeless man in Seattle called me a good-for-nothing N-word, word for word. Keep in mind that at the time this happened, I was a 14-year-old white kid with a steadier job than he had. Homeless people are like ghosts in America. Nobody acknowledges them, we are frightened by them, and even sometimes amused. I was at a McDonald's in the US, and no one kicked my ass for wearing my futuristic computer glasses. Because it isn't like Paris. Tax. Why not put a flipping price sticker that includes it, so I don't have to work out if I have enough money for everything? Yes, this is so true. I've had to bust out the calculator in advance for nearly every major transaction. Wouldn't say it would be shocking, but just a tad startling. Basically, flags. Flags everywhere. On the pavements, in the windows, on the side of buildings, up poles, on cars, on doors, on posters, pretty much anything it could be stuck to. Oh, and the real comfy feeling of diners. Genuinely felt welcome in any I went for a cup of tea in. Always got a raised eyebrow and a question when I asked for hot tea instead of iced tea. I'm from Canada too, and I visited Anaheim. Portion sizes were gigantic. I swear they slaughtered 5 chickens for my girlfriend's dish at the Cheesecake Factory. The next morning's breakfast at the hotel was huge too. I felt like I was going to explode after. Also, corn syrup and everything. The ketchup and Coke were thick. Was definitely weird, and I wasn't a big fan of it. Seriously, if you're wondering why you have an obesity problem, this and the last point are part of it. I know obesity is a global issue, but fixing it starts at home. I was also surprised with how friendly and forward people were. Random strangers would talk to us, and staff were nice. Everyone spoke louder than back home too. This wasn't just at Disneyland, but also at small places on Newport. Speaking of Newport, we went to Balboa Island. Just off the island is a huge plastic surgery complex. That was interesting. Oh, and Americans take their schools seriously. Many houses on Balboa had university flags flying, and I saw a lot of UCLA and USC shirts. Oh, and girls breaking into song in the middle of the street? I found this confusing. I wasn't sure whether to find it endearing or cheesy. If anyone did that back home, people would think they're insane. But in America, I saw this multiple times. Holy car! I didn't expect that many responses to this. So to clear some things up that are getting repeated in the comments, I now understand that Canada also has HFCS in many foods. However, I did still find Coke and ketchup sweeter and more syrupy. That's what I meant by thicker. In regards to Cheesecake Factory, we ate there the day we arrived. There's not much choice in local food when you're on the Disneyland resort. Plus, my girlfriend's organization she volunteers for sends the people they help to Cheesecake, so there was a bit of meaning to it. Oh, and in regard to schools, that's interesting that it's sports teams. I believe my school, the University of Alberta, has pretty good teams, but no one really cares unless they're directly affiliated with them. They seem more like clubs here. Interesting to see the difference there. I'm also leaning towards good in regards to girls singing. Life could always be more like Hairspray. My first visit to America was Detroit. I haven't been back to America since. See, the problem is you went to Detroit. 90% of American citizens are too afraid to visit Detroit. Hey, lay off Detroit. Them people are living in Mad Max times. I was on the West Coast for about 2 months a couple of years ago. I'm from the Netherlands. Things that struck me. Portion sizes. Your small pizza is our large pizza. Your medium pizza is our family pizza. Your large pizza doesn't fit inside our borders. Clean streets. I saw a lot of $1,000 littering fine signs. Must have worked because there wasn't so much as a cigarette butt on the streets. Space! You have a lot of it. Everything is bigger, taller, larger, wider, and further apart. Food is cheaper than in Europe. Alcohol is more expensive. I figured out why you don't see a lot of American cars outside of America. I'll stop here before I insult people. I visited a Giants game in San Francisco and couldn't believe my eyes when Giants and Cardinals fans were sharing a couple of beers and eating hot dogs together while cheering for different teams. In Europe, we have to separate soccer fans from the moment they arrive in the game city until the second they leave, to stop them from bashing each other's heads in. Also, the entertainment value with all the songs and games is much higher than in European sports matches. TLDR, when you're from Europe and visit the USA, it's like somebody puts the contrast on your TV on maximum and turns the volume up. Rich people are richer, poor people are poorer, sweets are sweeter, laws are stricter, sports are more fun, everything is bigger, and man, do you guys build crappy cars. The amount of self-segregation that blacks and whites do in St. Louis, a city whose black-white population is basically 50-50. I almost never saw mixed-race groups of people socializing. It was either all black or all white. The two societies are almost separate. I have been here for 3 months on an internship. Things I have noticed. That whole patriotism and American ideal is dead in the youth. No one believes in the American dream anymore. Every young person I have met has said, yeah, this country kind of sucks, but what can you do? And I am in the South. Also, the fact that it seems no one cooks. I prepare my own lunch and make my meals because it's cheaper and healthier. People seemed strange to know that as a 20-year-old male, I can cook and choose to. Also, the use of elevators. I have not seen people take the elevator down from the second floor so many times in my life. I'm sure this will all get buried, but the 1 or 2 of you who make it this far, high five! Speaking in terms of Americans I've met, I can say that I have met equal amounts of patriots and the disillusioned amongst the young and old alike. I thought fat people in Taiwan were fat, but then I saw Americans. Almost no Taiwanese are considered fat to me now. I spent a summer in Canada, but we went down to Chicago to go to Lollapalooza. On the way back, our bus had a stopover in Detroit. We left the bus terminal to get some food and passed by a taxi rank. One of the drivers asked, "You boys need a lift?" We politely declined, but he was eager as can be. "What do you want then? Wacky tobacco?" We explained that we were about to cross the border into Canada and didn't want any wacky tobacco, thanks. White powder? No thanks, kind taxi man. Smack? I was shocked. Taxi drivers in Ireland are reluctant to even drive anywhere. American taxi drivers are significantly more helpful and seem to provide a much wider range of services. Other shocking things about America include the drinking age being 21. Quite how fat the people manage to get. That's not to say that all Americans are fat, just that those that are fat are really flipping fat. The existence of Four Loko. The people that hold rock and roll will kill your soul signs outside festivals. Heinz ketchup has different ingredients in America and is slightly less nice. It's really hard to narrow it down to one thing, so I'm not going to. The anti-child termination billboards, they horrified me, not in the way they intended. Along the same vein, people handing out anti-child termination propaganda outside a Nine Inch Nails concert. Only stuff I get handed at concerts here is for trashy clubs with their band-themed after-parties. The attitude of servers in restaurants. If someone messed up, the amount of apologies I would get, they were practically begging for my forgiveness, so I didn't leave them without a tip. It was awful. Religious shopping channel programs. There was a nun on TV trying to sell me a figurine of baby Jesus. I've never seen anything like it. US flags everywhere. So many. That level of continual patriotism seems almost redundant when you're smack bang in the middle of the country. Heck, I could easily keep going, but I'll leave it at that. Oh, one more. Americans call the main meal the entree. Mind-boggling. Brazilian here. Everything is so flipping cheap. From food to soda to cars and computers. Everything is a tenth of the flipping international price. And also, gas. When I was in America visiting my folks, the lady with nice hair on CNN was complaining about the gas prices, and I noticed something didn't seem right with the numbers, so I made a few conversions and started laughing. No one in the room got it. 1 liter of gas in America, $1.04. 1 liter of gas in Brazil, $3,017. I've never been to the US, but the most shocking thing I found out about America recently was that it's legal to not only carry a piece around with you for no reason at all, but to carry them openly as if you're flipping Rambo or something. I knew that many Americans own more ordnance than the military, but I just assumed they had to remain inside the house. For home protection, I hear all the time. I didn't realize you can just walk around armed to the teeth. Hey wife, going to McDonald's. Where's my ammunition? I'll come with you. Need to give my 45 a walk. Not trying to start another massive debate or anything, I'm just saying, to my perspective, that is absolutely crazy. In Australia, only the police carry weapons, and even then they are very, very rarely used. The police get in more trouble for shooting people than they would just letting them get away with crimes. Human life is considered very valuable, even criminals. And just to be clear, because the firearms are great, there are laws, replies are already starting, please note that I'm not trying to offend or judge anybody. This is simply my perspective on something that is shocking to me about the United States, as asked by the OP. I'm from New Zealand, visited California a few years ago. While getting a haircut, the lady asked me where I was from. I said, New Zealand. She then proceeded to try guess what state I was in until I told her it was a country. She then refuses to believe that New Zealand is a country, no matter what I told her about my country. That amazed me. Another thing was the guy at the airport asking if we still hunt and eat the Maori. That was asked after he asked whether or not we had indoor plumbing in New Zealand. It was then that I realized most Americans I met were extremely narrow-minded and thought the world outside the US was an undeveloped place totally reliant on their great country. Most people were quite friendly, though. Most shocking thing I saw? Poverty. Absolute poverty. I visited the States 5 times, and each and every time it is impossible not to notice a huge problem with poverty. I'm Irish, so coming to the States I had a high enough standard on how a first world country should be, and it was as sad as it was shocking to notice how badly some people had it. Chicago. Well, I've been in Chicago quite a bit, with O'Hare being the main international airport for me, and it's not the worst, but some of the houses in which I've seen people come out of, and the number of homeless, has left me speechless. I've been in Chicago in the middle of winter, and that stuff is cold. I don't understand how people manage to survive. Washington and New York. They're about on the same level. In the center of these cities, you can see the wealth, but venture outside them a little and the striking difference in living conditions is amazing. Just by looking like I had money, I've nearly been mugged twice. Los Angeles. LA was alright, except for the fact that if you get on the tram to venture from the city center out to Long Beach, you pass through some seriously trash-looking neighborhoods. It's scary, actually, that the population of Ireland lives in this small area, and they're so badly off compared to us. Also, lots of homeless, like lots. New Orleans. What the actual flip? I've never met nicer people in my life. Never. But what the actual flipping flip? How can you let people live like that? It's disgraceful. If you just walk outside the normal tourist area, you're into a place with high crime/violence, and you can see why. They have nothing. There's a massive gap between the rich and poor, and you seriously need to do something about it. The fact that America is built for cars and not for people. Excluding the original 13 colonies and some major cities, hello, New York and Boston, San Francisco and Chicago, the United States is built on a scale where the basic unit of measurement is not a human being, but a Ford F-150, at least. The streets are gargantuan, the endless sprawl of buildings is just mind-boggling, and when someone says, "It's only 15 minutes, they mean it's a 15-minute drive on the freeway, and not a 15-minute walk. Everything is car-centered, and without a car you ain't going nowhere. No wonder there is so much drunk driving. There is no other option for the people to get around. The exceptions are the cities that have a working rail-based public transport system. People here can get around like they do in the rest of the world. The scale of the place, the fact that everything is so insanely spread around, makes the entire urban area of the country seem incredibly empty, anonymous, unwelcoming, and just depressing at times. Showed someone who worked in a hotel in Mississippi my passport as a form of identification. She had never seen one before despite working in the hospital industry. I believe her exact words were, "Wow, you've got like a whole book there."
People of Reddit, what was the most not safe for work event you ever stumbled upon in high school? Not me, but a friend of mine who was a yearbook photographer. She was a rail-thin, awkward, geeky high schooler and was asked to photograph a day in the life of the swim team. Our school had the football fever, and so other sports were always trying to get more than a few mentions in the yearbook packed with dozens of football shots. So my friend showed up to the swim team practice and later state tournament. She was asked to join them later at their victory party, which was at someone's house with its own pool and hot tub. When she got there, most of the team was already drunk, and not an adult in sight. There were also a lot of girlfriends of the team there, and more than once, my friend was asked to join them naked in the hot tub. Fun was pretty freely flowing, and she strived constantly to get acceptable photos instead of the wanton depravity around her. At one point, some naked girl was chugging while she was in the cowboy position, screwing on top of her boyfriend while everyone cheered her on. They kept begging my friend to take photos, and she refused in horrified shock. Some of the guys got really handsy with her until finally she picked a time when they were distracted, and she left. She later was crying to her best friend because she felt so stressed out, and it was nothing like she expected. Sort of like showing a 10-year-old Caligula when they were expecting Toy Story 2. Only one photo made it to yearbook from that party, a hot tub photo where she had to crop out the beer keg and everyone's body was below the waterline so you couldn't tell they were naked. My high school had to ban blankets after 2 freshmen were caught having fun under one in the middle of the art hallway. I walked into a bathroom after a fight. Broken mirror, blood smeared on the wall and floor, water everywhere, probably unrelated to the fight, and a lot of bloody tissues in the sink. Oh, and there was a turd in the urinal. I hope that was unrelated to the fight. Someone got the crap kicked out of him. A freshman got pleasured by his girlfriend under the table in the cafeteria during lunch. Someone sitting near them noticed what was happening, took a video, and posted it online. The administration quickly found out, the video was taken down, and all 3 involved were suspended. I ran cross-country in high school. Sometimes during practice, we would run through trails in the woods surrounding the high school. One day right after school ended, we started running down the trails and stumbled upon 2 students having fun. Judging by their reactions, I don't think they were expecting a group of 15 guys to run by as they were getting it on. High school bus hit a deer. Police were called. Deer was shot 3 times in front of the bus to put it down. Watched it from the parking lot while skipping school. We had a girl who would sit in the back of the bus and seemed to always have a different dude sit next to her. Turns out she was giving guys pleasure for a small price. Had a guy run through the school completely naked. High school, by the way. Even ran up and slapped some teacher's butt. Haven't heard of him since, but it was like 5+ years ago. Legend has it that a guy in my sophomore or junior year used to sit next to his girlfriend and get pleasure during English class. A sophomore at my school gave a freshman a donut filled with white sauce. He got criminal charges. I have no idea what the criminal charges were. I do know that he got fired from his job and expelled. Walked into a bathroom after school and found a guy and a girl about to go to town. She had her shirt off and skirt up. He had his pants on. I mean, I caught them just before the moment of insertion. I said nothing. I would have let them to it, except all of the bathrooms on campus except this one were always locked shortly before last bell. So I silently walked to a urinal, calmly did my business, properly washed my hands. By the time I went to leave, the girl was hiding in a stall and the guy was waiting by the door. I shrugged at the guy. Guy shrugged back. I left and heard the door lock behind me. Not one of us said anything or made a sound during the entire exchange. Edit. For everyone calling it a power move, I appreciate it, but I just didn't want to have to pee in the bushes. We always threw house parties at my friend's house. One day I went to grab my jacket from one of the rooms and I heard some moaning and groaning, so I thought it was just a couple hooking up. I flipped the lights on because I couldn't find my jacket and saw that 3 of the track girls were butt naked, finger-banging and eating each other out. Instead of just standing there and watching or trying to participate, my nerdy high school self said, "Hi," waved, and said, "Have fun," as I walked out, giving them privacy. Later on that year, I ended up dating one of the girls and would always try to mention it, and maybe try to get a threesome going. Never happened though. She said it was just a drunk moment. We had 2 people banging under the band bus in the mud at a contest. No one thought it would be a bad idea for the cross-country team to have thin white uniforms until we had a race in a thunderstorm. So many flashbacks of eggplants swaying with each stride. This next one's pretty violent, so fair warning. There was a kid. We'll call him CB. He was notoriously a bad kid. Always in fights, getting kicked out of school, etc. Anyways, his locker wasn't next to mine, but it was really close. He and I never had problems because I purposefully avoided him. One day, another kid, we will call AC, and CB got into an argument. It led to a pushing and shoving match and some crap talking, but got separated really quickly. The next day, AC was walking past our lockers, and CB pulled a literal crowbar out of his locker, ran up behind AC, and hit him in the back of the head so hard that blood hit me in the face. Part of AC's scalp literally half folded over the back of his head as he was on the floor. CB started hitting him in the back and the back of the head with it. Other students jumped on him and held him down. An ambulance took AC to the hospital. His skull was fractured and he had broken ribs. I had to get checked out because of the blood exposure. No idea where CB went, but I never saw him again. Not really not safe for work, just my most vivid high school memory. It was the biggest poop I'd ever seen. Just one huge log, to my memory the size of the toilet bowl. It definitely didn't fit down the hole and had to be removed by a janitor. Everyone told their friends about it, and one by one, we all went and checked it out. Also, no toilet paper in the bowl. All that was there was the one big, fat, legendary turd. It physically hurts me to think about how that came out of a butthole. I would just like to add that I am touched and humbled by all of your poo-related stories. In this time of division and opposition, let us remember we are united by poo. Holy crap, I had the same thing in middle school. Someone made such a girthy, long, robust turd that it had braced itself end-to-end across the entire rim of the toilet above the water. It was incredible. It reeked. It was like God himself had wedged it in there. We missed the first 10 minutes of class as every boy shuffled giddily through the boys' restroom to the big stall where that glorious poop lay in state. To remember it now was easily 3 to 4 inches in diameter and almost a foot long, just freaking remarkable. The water was even flushed away several times to demonstrate there was no trickery. A teacher rushed in and used a plunger to try and tap it in. It held once, twice, a third time. We were buckled with laughter. It finally broke, and both pieces landed in such a way that still prevented them from going down. Absolute highlight in middle school. I went to a small party at my friend's house. My girlfriend and I got there late. We went in and noticed nobody was in the living room. Weird. They said they'd be here. Start walking to the back and I could hear several voices in the bedroom. I just opened the door and there were 7 of my friends just having a casual group fun. Not me specifically, but 2 kids in my Catholic high school banged in the bathroom and someone caught them and videotaped it. They posted it online. Our school made the news and now they measure girls' skirts if they look too high, as well as banning phones. Because yeah, girls' skirts were the problem here. In middle school, the health teach went to show a video on the projector and I guess he had porn on his video player. He offered everyone A's to keep quiet. He was fired, then went to work for a Catholic school. This was junior high, but one kid who we suspected was gay gave another kid who we did not suspect was gay head in the bathroom stall. And for what? A hollow foil Clefairy Pokemon card. Man has his priorities straight. I went to a boarding school my freshman year of high school, and a few weeks in, I volunteered to help walk our librarian's dog for her while her leg was healing after an injury. So I was walking this huge dog through the woods around campus when he suddenly sniffed the air and just ripped the leash out of my hands and took off into the underbrush. I started chasing after him when I heard screaming and yelling. I thought, oh god, this dog mauled someone and I'm going to get expelled! Broke through a clearing and there were 5 half-naked upperclassmen trying to put their clothes on and scatter while this dog is joyously barking and jumping up on and licking them. Too long didn't read, accidentally interrupted group fun in the woods with my librarian's dog. I guess since so many people were asking, yes, it was a co-ed school, and yes, both sexes represented. Thumbs up for diversity. Went to teacher's room to get some papers that my Portuguese teacher had forgotten and stumbled at my gym and biology teachers kissing each other really hard over the meeting table. I mean, they didn't even notice me. And oh, it was a Catholic school, and they were both married, by the way. My face when I returned to class without the papers must have been priceless. A girl, freshman, went viral on Snapchat because the guy she was giving head to recorded her and said it was terrible during the recording. I'm a teacher who teaches in a high school. First day on the job, we had 2 kids beating cheeks in the back of one of my shop cars. Should specify I'm an automotive teacher. Pretty not safe for work if you ask me. Okay, 2 stories, 1 not safe for work, but still messed up. Janitor in elementary school died while mopping the floor, and somehow this didn't get around the entire school, and my entire class saw them taking his covered up body out the front door. Another was walking in on several people giving head in the band room. It became a daily thing, and I should have known to also knock on the practice room doors before entering. We had many PCs in our school, and every computer room had a projector. So once when the teacher was ill and no replacement came, we were in that room. Someone started the projector and quickly found out that every porn site he tried is blacklisted, but playing from USB apparently works fine. We later found out not only are the connections whitelisted, but also fully monitored. Not long after the movie show with sound and everything started, the IT tech guy comes with a substitute teacher. That internet search history was apparently enough for them to suddenly have a substitute teacher for us. Was walking around outside my high school and saw a dude leaning up against a wall getting head. They didn't see me, so I quietly turned around and walked away. Girl gave head to a guy and his friends filmed it. It was the talk of the school and she changed schools. 2 years later, she came back and gave head to a different guy by the same dumpster. No one filmed it this time. Some kid at a party got blackout wasted and crapped himself. In the middle of the crowd, he took his pants down and slipped in it, proceeded to army crawl to try and make it out, but just smeared it everywhere. He is still known as the party pooper. Godspeed, party pooper. In band before a football game, I walk into the percussion room to hang with the homies. Everyone is huddled around this dude in the corner of the room laughing, so of course I walk over to check it out. Turns out the dude was showing everyone how tiny his eggplant is and everyone was so fascinated. Yeah, it was really, really small, like from the tip of your pinky to the first knuckle down. I've never seen anything like it. Freshman year of high school, football team is out practicing. A senior varsity player came to the freshman locker room, cut all the locks off of our lockers, and stole our clothes. Nice enough to take wallets and phones, etc. out of pockets and leave them in the lockers, though. Idiot didn't realize the hallway cameras had him the whole time. Most of us chose not to shower until we got home and, as a team, proceeded to leave in groups in undershirts and boxers or no shirts and boxers after getting a call our rides were there. Small town, small school, so ultimately he was just benched for a few games, suspended for a day or 2, and his parents had to buy a bunch of padlocks. In middle school, some kids walked in and started having fun in the stall next to me while I was pooping. Eventually, they smelt my presence. Oh man, I've got a good one for this. So I'm in high school theater class and I've been helping the teacher out with a lot of tasks like setting up the green room and stuff. Just little helpful stuff. Well, apparently one of us left the door unlocked and unattended for a little too long. In our green room were 2 big blue couches that were the most uncomfortable things I had ever sat on. Teacher comes running into the room from the hall and says, "Hey, I think someone is in the green room. Go with me so I can have a witness." Thinking nothing of it, I go. We stand by the door and someone is most definitely in there making some pretty unusual sounds. I realize what the sound is a half second before the teacher throws the door open to 2 kids from my class getting down on that couch. I only had like 2 seconds of view time before the teacher screams, "Good golly, Miss Molly!" and slams the door. I sat outside that door crying from laughing for about 20 minutes before they knocked on the door to be let out, realizing we had the stage completely locked down. The look on their faces when the principal let them out and led them to his office will forever be in my mind. Can you imagine? Knee deep, about to blow, and from over your shoulder, "Good golly, Miss Molly!" I dream of it sometimes and still wake up laughing. Not me, but a few freshmen encountered sophomores having fun on a hill my school had for cross country and I think football. And then someone marked that hill on Google Maps. What happens in the locker room should stay in the locker room. With that said, I once walked in on a kid shoving a crucifix up his butt on a dare from his friends. Catholic school, eh? The janitor didn't cordon off the area when someone spilled a large half-gallon of milk. One student ran into the cafeteria, slipped and busted his butt. The janitor was suspended for 1 day. A bunch of guys in the athletics class got mad at a kid for mine for cheating during dodgeball, so they walked into the locker room butt naked and whipped him with towels. I just walk in and see someone's dong flipping around like a corrupted body part in a PS1 game before he leaps off the bench and goes ape on the guy. I noped the heck out and waited in the hallway with everyone else. Before anyone asks why didn't I or anyone else help, the coaches were nowhere to be found and we were scrawny freshmen against football and wrestling players in good shape. The guy eventually comes out drenched in sweat, calls us jerks, then kicked on one of our backpacks. 2 people were caught having fun behind the curtain on the gym stage by the Master of Custodial Arts, or janitor if you want to be a jerk about it. He said hi to both and walked out. Dave was cool. A junior boy filmed 2 sophomore girls having fun, and, of course, he made copies and passed them around. One copy landed in the dean's hands, and she called both girls and their parents in and freaking watched it. Yeah, because that's not gonna traumatize anybody. A guy hanging from the theater rafters by one arm. Like, by choice? What's the not safe for work part? Naked and covered with mashed potatoes? In 11th grade English, the desks were in a U shape, so some students were facing each other from across the room. This is important later on. So I had a few girls in my class I thought were attractive, and there was this one girl who was a cheerleader. She sat directly across from me so I could see her face rather than the back of her head. So anyways, because I was able to see her face, I was also able to see the rest of the front of her body. So one day while my teacher was reading us a book, this girl was wearing a fairly short skirt. I happened to just glance and saw up it. Being a 16 to 17-year-old, I'd glanced here and there. Eventually she noticed, and you would think that when you notice someone looking, you'd close your legs. The opposite happened. I'd been wearing athletic shorts as it was a hot April day, so this girl is spreading her legs whilst wearing a short skirt and a thong. She kept looking at me and kept spreading until she couldn't spread much further. I obviously had a tent, and I'm almost certain she must have seen because she was biting her lip, and I swear to God, I could have sworn she'd moved her thong over just enough to show herself slightly. Now keep in mind, there was maybe 10 people in that class, including me, and the side I was on had 5 or so of us, and was majority girls with the exception of me and a gay guy, so she was definitely showing me. Being awkward as heck though, I never bothered to talk to her much or anything, so I never got any chance to ask her out or anything, but that was probably the hottest thing I'd seen in high school. Walked over to the local church where my buddy and resident school 10 out of 10 were last seen. I started using a small flashlight because it was dark as heck and heard rustling under some pine trees. I heard whispering, and being sober just flat out yelled, "If you two are screwy, just let me know so I can turn around." Yeah, we are, but... My buddy Sean walks out, shirt covering himself. "Can you find me a condom, dude?" I walked back to the house, found a condom in my buddy's room, took it back, and laid it down where I got to see the 10 out of 10 naked. Thanks, bro. 11th grade, everyone. My high school had a lock-in every year where you basically stayed at the high school and weren't allowed to leave from like 6 p.m. to midnight. They were usually pretty boring and stupid as heck because students had to bring their own consoles and could only bring E-rated games and PG-rated movies. Anyways, there was an upstairs to my school, but it was only 2 rooms. One of them was locked and the other movies were playing in. I was watching movies upstairs, and when I went to use the bathroom up there, I opened the door to a full-on group fun session. I mean like 8 kids, and it wasn't even that big of a bathroom. I don't understand why they wouldn't lock the door. I really wish they did so I didn't see that. I then went downstairs to the locker room where a bunch of kids, this was the boys' locker room, but there were like 10 guys and 10 girls playing Truth or Dare. I was a really shy and unpopular kid, so stuff like that was weird for me. One of the girls saw me come in and dared another girl to go down on me in front of them. I got really embarrassed and ran out of there as fast as I could. By that time, it was only like 10, so I talked to the person running it and told them that I threw up and they let me leave. I never went to another one of those stupid things after that. In English class, 10th grade, I was sitting next to this dude. For storytelling purposes, named Chad. Chad was always a little weird and never really paid attention in class. He preferred to go on gag websites like Google Gravity and whatnot for the entirety of class, occasionally talking to me and showing off what weird stuff he found. That was all good. Then one day, I looked over just out of curiosity for what weird stuff he might have found that day. First thing I saw was that his screen was going through the standard Windows Update reboot screen. Then I saw his desk bouncing up and down somewhat. I just figured he was bouncing his legs with some ADHD-type energy while he was waiting for his computer to finish updating, so I go back to my work. A few minutes later, he apparently started making sounds. I was unaware of this as I was watching YouTube. These sounds were heard by the group of talkative girls sitting a couple of seats over. They loudly complained a lot to the teacher, so the teacher walked over and tried talking to Chad. When Chad saw the teacher walking over, he went into panic mode and tried to stealthily hide what he was doing. Naturally, he failed spectacularly and sent his desk forward and actually helped it fall on accident when he tried to save it. So Chad was sitting in his seat, one hand trying to pull his desk back up while the other was desperately grasping the zipper region of his pants. I only learned what happened after the fact, as I have a spectacular ability to ignore what's going on around me when I watch YouTube. However, I found out that he got suspended for a week. Chad went down as a legend around my school as the man who rubbed one out during English. He was highly respected among all the boys in the school for the next 2 years, and his reputation spread to the surrounding schools so that when I went to sporting events, the opposing teams would ask me about him. In home ec, a kid pulled his eggplant out and set it on his desk and got the teacher to look at it. Nothing happened, and she laughed it off. A few weeks later, another kid in the same class crushed up a Tic Tac and the teacher watched him do a line of it. She called the police, had drug dogs come in, and had the kid suspended for a week or two. Same teacher made us read aloud what we were reading in study hall once. Bad idea. It was a bunch of tips on how to give head from 17 magazine, or a similar magazine. Each one of us had to take a turn reading one, each person yelling the tip to all who could hear. Freshman year, our chemistry teacher taught us how to make gunpowder. We were supposed to light it all in the flame hood, made a huge batch, put it in a 2-liter bottle, and blew it up outside. Ironically, cops weren't called for that one. Drew a bunch of eggplants on rival team school buses during a basketball tournament. It was orchestrated so no one could tell who did it. Police got called in. It's a small town with 3 officers. 2 stayed inside with the kids, 1 had to scrub the eggplants off the buses. Result, a bunch of kids had to wait in the gym for a few hours, and we got interrogated. No one confessed, so nothing happened there. Not safe for work, but those and a few unmentionable events got us out of senior year a week early. The administration waited until a Friday and told us we were done with high school and to not come back until graduation. That was kinda cool, but we didn't get to have prank week. This was before cell phones had passwords. Found a phone. Looked at the picture to see who it was. Saw a video of a girl spreading peanut butter on her genitals and having her dog lick it up. This didn't happen to me specifically, but it happened in the class that I happened to be in. I was in my theater class and we were practicing a play that we were going to do during one of the periods of school. 15 of us were on the stage with the theater teacher working on our part. The 15 of us were robots that worked together as a machine, and the other 4 went with the student teacher because they were the humans of the play. They went to one of the lecture halls and the student teacher flipped on the lights and they caught 2 people making out in the area, and the girl was giving the guy pleasure. Needless to say, the 2 got out of there real quick with the guy zipping himself up. Went to a private all-boys school. My senior year, I walked into the band practice hall on a Saturday afternoon to find 2 guys going at it. One was elbow deep in the other's butt. And that's how I found out what fisting is. I didn't report them, but I did call the other one Kermit for the rest of the year. We once had to work with iPads, and when I turned mine on, the background image was a furry, and when I went to the internet browser, it was on Hentai Haven. Of course, I quickly backed out of the site before anyone could see it. I must say, the Chad who looked up porn on a school iPad had some cojones on him. I think one of the most I've ever laughed in school was when someone managed to connect to the projector in the assembly hall and play Shrek is Love, Shrek is Life, followed by Ram Ranch. I had my goon sneak into school to take down all the bells as a prank. He didn't know the difference between fire bells and class bells and took down both. That made the work environment not safe, and is why the police were called. I don't know which one is the most not safe for work experience, but each one has their own merit. What kind of schools y'all go to?
Who is someone that we praise but was actually a horrible person? Chris Gardner, the man who Will Smith played in The Pursuit of Happiness, is considered to be an amazing success story, an inspiration, and a great father. He actually cheated on his wife with a dental student and got her pregnant. He then started dating said dental student and reportedly beat her. He was even taken in by police because of a domestic abuse charge. Dr. Seuss was having an affair with a woman while his wife had cancer. His wife killed herself because of it. Charles Dickens dumped his wife of 10 kids and 22 years for an 18-year-old mistress. When she called him out on it, he publicly called her a fat jackass. I'll just repost my answer to a question similar to this that was posted a while back. James Cameron. His movies are great, but he's such a butt. There's a reason why the crews to your movies are constantly revolting against you. He's been married 5 times. His marriage to Linda Hamilton ended after just 8 months because he was caught cheating with Susie Amis, who played Rose's granddaughter in the Titanic. He called agnosticism cowardly atheism. Orson Scott Card described him as selfish and cruel while working on the novelization to The Abyss. After working with Cameron on Titanic, Kate Winslet decided she would not work with him again unless she's earned a lot of money. She said that Cameron is a nightmare to work with. Studios have come to fear his habit of straying way over schedule and over budget. He is notorious on set for his uncompromising and dictatorial manner, as well as his flaming temper. Sam Worthington said Cameron would use a nail gun to nail the crew's cell phones to a wall in retaliation for unwanted ringing during production of Avatar. The first editor of The Terminator got fed up with Cameron and refused to edit the movie to Cameron's specifications. He did it so he could get fired. The crew that worked on Aliens walked off set. The entire crew. They eventually came back after a lengthy negotiation and an apology from Cameron for his conduct. Composer James Horner refused to work with him for 10 years after doing the score to Aliens. Ed Harris and Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio still refuse to talk about their experience working with him on The Abyss. Some few things that are known is that Cameron ordered the actors to go to the bathroom in their diving suits to save time between takes, and every actor in the movie had major breakdowns at some point during the production of the movie. One of the few things that Harris has said is that he was driving home one day while shooting and spontaneously started crying, and he had to pull to the side of the road until he stopped. Mastrantonio has just said it was a horrible experience. The cast had to relieve their anger by completely destroying their dressing rooms, tossing couches and ripping the walls apart. Cameron has admitted that the only reason why he made the Titanic was to get the studio to finance his dive to the actual ship. He went to the studio, opened a book of Titanic paintings and said, "This ship, Romeo and Juliet." They greenlit the movie on the spot. His reputation is legendary in the business. During the 70th Golden Globe Awards, Amy Poehler joked about the controversy around the depiction of the torture in Zero Dark 30, a film co-produced and directed by Cameron's second wife, Catherine Bigelow. Poehler said, "When it comes to torture, I trust the lady who spent 3 years married to James Cameron." Wow, I knew that Cameron and the film crew of Aliens didn't get along, but I didn't realize he was the directing equivalent of Edward Norton. Steve Harvey. He was married 3 times and cheated. All 3 times. As a result, he was divorced 3 times. Still writes books on relationships, not to mention his views/lack of understanding of evolution. Abe Lincoln got the nickname Honest Abe because of impartial judgment during cockfights. Okay, so I desperately wanted this to be true, but I've done some research, and this anecdote appears to be one of a number of many small events that might possibly have contributed to the name Honest Abe. Not a single person, but the Kennedy family, especially Ted Kennedy, who had an affair with his secretary, got into a car accident with her while DUI, and then left her to die. He also got expelled from Harvard for academic dishonesty several years before that. I believe that when Ted had the accident that killed the girl, he called his political advisor before calling an ambulance. His old man was a Nazism apologist as well, chose to seek appeasement with the Führer, even though he knew that Jews were being massacred and most of Europe was being flattened. Also refused to allow the US Congress to give aid to the UK to fight Germany, and was later involved in helping fund the IRA. I believe when Ted had the accident that killed the girl, he called his political advisor before calling an ambulance. By current standards, pretty much everyone who lived on the planet before about 1800. Michael Jordan was a bit of an a-hole. Can't knock his game, but you can find a lot of bad stuff about him with a simple Google search if you're interested. A bit? That's an understatement. I've never read a single account of a story that portrays Michael Jordan as a decent person or even just a person who isn't a jerk. Jordan is notorious for being a huge D-bag. Andrew Jackson. From the spoil system to the Trail of Tears, thanks again, Mr. Jackson. Let us honor your achievements by placing you on our $20 bill. Well, the guy hated paper money, so putting him on the $20 bill is a big FU to him. I have one of his violins. It's weird, considering I'm 1/4 Cherokee. My biggest problem with Thomas Edison was the blatant lies he would spread in order to retain a financial monopoly on power generation. He would travel and run demonstrations of why alternating current is dangerous by electrocuting an animal with something like 5,000 volts, claiming that it was 1/4 of the voltage intended to be used to transmit power, in order to scare people into accepting direct current as the only safe form of electrical transmission. Equivalent DC voltage would have been much more destructive, but he always withheld that information. Horrible is a strong word, but any of the Scientology celebrities, I'd have to say. I'm always surprised by who is a part of it. Woody Allen. To this day, my husband refuses to believe that he is scummy. Oh, come on! What kind of scummy man would marry his daughter? Flipping Oprah. Oprah is the only reason people ever even started to pay attention to this entire Jenny McCarthy autism vaccines bullpoop. She is the only reason people trust Dr. Phil to give advice. Spoiler alert, he should not be counseling people, and she's the reason my grandma says stuff like, "But Dr. Oz said that if I eat a lot of green coffee and rub acai beans on my face, I'll look 40. Still love you though, Grandma. Oprah has caused a lot of bullpoop. F Oprah. I hate the hip, quirky reputation Bill Murray has managed to get over the past few years. I used to work at a place where he was occasionally a customer. He's kind of a dismissive jerk. He can be exceptionally rude to the people around him. I understand that celebrities want to be left alone in public like everyone else, but he was often unpleasant with the staff, and nobody there acted like a gawky fan with famous people. We had other famous customers, some much more notable and important than him, and we knew not to make celebrities uncomfortable. Stephen Colbert, David Cross, Joe Biden, all lovely and gracious. Bill Murray is just a complete member for the sake of being one. Jimmy Savile. Over here in the UK, he had his own TV show and was a celebrity, until after he died it was revealed that he was fixing more than the children's wishes. I guess it's past tense, being praised, but yeah. Richard Dawkins is simply immature, his charity was stolen from, and he is simply rude. The only reason he is relevant in the mainstream is because he wrote an edgy book. If it wasn't for that, he would have been just another scientist in another lab, written about only in specific journals. Dawkins is brilliant within his field. The man knows a lot about evolution, but he's a condescending, judgmental a-hole when it comes to other folks' faith. I'm an atheist myself, but I can't stand the way Dawkins talks about religious people, and there have been a fair number of allegations of sexism against him as well. The atheist community could do so much better than Dawkins. I can't stand Dawkins. He's so gosh darn smug. If you're going to be a smug anti-theist, at least be a hilarious alcoholic bohemian like Christopher Hitchens. I'm inclined to agree with the people commenting on this. Dawkins may be smart, but they really need to run his commentary through a spin doctor first. I wouldn't say horrible, but Nelson Mandela is given a free ride on a lot of things. I'm going from memory here and on mobile, so I'm sure someone will correct any errors. For starters, he promised South Africa the Freedom Charter, essentially a 1945 UK-style welfare state, whilst simultaneously selling much of the country's industry off to foreign companies. He had written a lot in Robben Island about how the only way South Africa could go forward was by nationalising industry. He essentially promised a welfare state he knew he couldn't provide, and doomed the poorest of the nation. John Pilgar's Freedom Next Time is a fantastic book about this. He argues that in part thanks to Mandela's actions, South Africa became an economic apartheid, which was just as bad for the people in townships than actual apartheid. He also supported Mbeki's assertions that HIV didn't cause AIDS, and that anti-retroviral drugs were a Western conspiracy. The thing is, weighed against the good he did in South Africa, and how much he helped that country heal, perhaps it isn't that significant. It just annoys me that people are completely unwilling to recognize any of these pretty big flaws. I would treat him as a George Washington. He's not a man who lived, he's the father of the nation and gets a lot of passes for that. You need something to center the culture on. He's a myth, not a man. Jimmy Page and Led Zeppelin kidnapped a 14-year-old girl. Wow, I never knew this. In 1972, Page was hanging around a nightclub and laid eyes on 14-year-old Laurie Maddox. He liked what he saw and didn't give a flip that she was underage by, well, a lot. Why should he, after all? The club clearly didn't. As the young, handsome lead guitarist in the biggest rock band in the world, Page was probably very shy and awkward around girls. So, instead he sent roadie Richard Cole to Maddox's table with the message, "Jimmy told me that he's going to have you whether you like it or not." The roadie then grabbed her and chucked her in the back of the limo, saying, "You effing move and I'll effing have your head." From there, they drove back to Page's house, where he and Maddox proceeded to have lots and lots of dirty, unspeakable acts. Of course, Page knew this was incredibly wrong, and if word got out, he was screwed. So he did the only responsible thing he could think of. For 3 long years, Maddox was for the most part kept behind closed doors, so the relationship with Page wasn't discovered and he wouldn't end up in jail. King Arthur. Dude ain't even real. John Wayne. I believe in white supremacy, at least to a point where African Americans are responsibly educated. He was also an aggressive drunk and a draft dodger despite playing heroic roles. Pablo Picasso, genius artist though he undeniably was, treated the people in his life like trash. Affairs on top of affairs. He drove his first wife into a mental breakdown and literally turned their only son into Picasso's chauffeur. He had a child with his first mistress, who he played mind games with on a daily basis for the rest of her life. After he died, she killed herself. His second mistress, he drove into a mental breakdown. His third, he physically abused. He did have 2 children with her, who he refused to legally acknowledge for years. And his second and final wife, treated like a doormat, who also ended up killing herself after he died. Oh, and after he died, his second wife barred all of his previous family from his funeral, including his grandson, who was so distraught by this, he killed himself too. Amazing, amazing artist, but totally effing sadistic in how he treated the people around him. Oliver Cromwell is massively praised and admired in Britain, often making it into lists of the top 10 greatest Britons in British history. Meanwhile, he is universally vilified in Ireland, and regularly makes it into lists of the top 10 greatest villains in Irish history. I find it quite amazing that the British ignore his genocidal campaigns in Ireland and prefer to erect massive statues of him outside their parliament instead. I mean, I know I'm supposed to praise dear leader, but Kim Jong-un is kind of a d-hole. Arnold Schwarzenegger, illegitimate child with the maid working in his house, reduced the sentence of a convicted murderer for a political friend, signed into law the biggest tax increase in California ever whilst campaigning for lower taxes, and an overall disgusting political weasel. And yet, still one of the more respectable figures in the modern GOP. Jebediah Springfield, aka Hans Sprungfeld. Ronald Reagan was probably involved in the Iran-Contra affair and dealing with Iran before the election against Carter. Republican ties let Iran know they'd get a better deal if they waited until after the election was decided to release the hostages, after which Reagan's staff sold them weapons for gold, which was then funneled into South American right-wing terrorist organizations that killed thousands of people in cold blood. That and his economic policies have led to a lot of the crap we are dealing with today. Mother Teresa. She said that people needed to suffer to be closer to God and would deny medical care to people under her care, so they would suffer and die. One case that changed my opinion was a teenage boy who had a kidney problem, easily fixed by surgery, but the nuns of the order refused to allow him to be taken, and instead just gave him aspirin and waited for him to die. She also diverted a lot of the money donated meant for helping poor people towards extreme pro-life positions, including stopping legal contraception. John Lennon. Not only was his talent blown out of proportion, Imagine is probably the most overrated song of all time, and unintelligent, he was clueless about social issues, he was a pretty horrible person in general. He would beat his family and verbally abuse his son, Julian, who stated publicly that Paul was more of a father to him. On one occasion, Julian was laughing, and John yelled, "I hate the way you effing laugh," and sent him away. There is a long list of horrible things he has done. Winston Churchill wanted to start World War III against Russia the moment Germany was divided up. Oh, and William Wallace. After the Battle of Stirling Bridge, he skinned one of the English lords and made a belt out of his skin. Even for the time, it was needlessly barbaric. Steve Jobs. Misogynist, all but abandoned his daughter for years, a-hole to most people he met. Most Appleites will tell you that he sucked as a boss, and that Tim Cook is far better. He deserved to get fired by his own company, as he did early on. Marlon Brando showed up to Apocalypse Now 50 pounds overweight and didn't know a single word of his lines, which is the reason he appears in shadows the whole movie. He's also notorious for being extremely difficult to work with on sets, often never memorizing his lines and having cue cards. The fact that he didn't prepare for roles and was reading cue cards makes his acting even more impressive. Snoop Dogg or Lion or whatever the flip his name is now. People seem to forget that he actually murdered someone but got away with it, but everyone praises him as a chill dude who smokes herb and advocates for legalization. Isaac Newton. Seems like he went out of his way to demolish Leibniz for having independently developed calculus. Christopher Columbus was a horrible human being who pioneered the sex human traffic trade in the Americas using 9 to 10-year-old girls. He was also wildly racist toward the Lucayan natives of the West Indies and once said, "I could conquer the whole lot of them with 50 men and govern them as I pleased." Yet he is honored in the same way Martin Luther King and Abraham Lincoln are, with a holiday thanks to the Knights of Columbus, a 20th century all-male Catholic group who lobbied Roosevelt for a Catholic role model for boys to look up to. J.D. Rockefeller was a huge piece of poo who tried to cover it by donating a huge chunk of his fortune to universities and medical research. Really though, he was an a-hole. He rigged up explosives in mines and blew them up to send his miners running. The ones that made it up to the surface were then shot as they ran out of the mines. Of course, Rockefeller denied that he had anything to do with it. Jerry Lewis, the telethon guy. He reaped all this goodwill while taking advantage of children with disabilities, using them for his tearjerker broadcasts. He has made awful public comments like that people with MD are living as half a person, and has called people cripples, and reacted poorly to people criticizing the way he strips disabled people of their dignity. The telethon has refused to make their financial records available and account for where all their donations go. Jeremy Clarkson. Venerated by many Redditors, yet he possesses many of the qualities that would make most people here label anyone who had those qualities an industrial-strength D-bag and a-hole. Uses racist language, makes offensive comments, cheats on his wife, punches a co-worker because he doesn't like the food he's given his co-worker a mouthful of abuse for no good reason, then laughs about it because he thinks he has a guaranteed fan base that will turn a blind eye to his scumbaggery. Also, he knows whatever he does, he is financially bulletproof. If the BBC kick him out, another network will pay a fortune to have him on their books. That last bit aged really well. It seems that a few people here have only ever learned about Guy Fawkes from V for Vendetta. So here's a reason to toss out your Hot Topic mask, in addition to the whole sweatshop labor thing. Dude was a religious zealot. The entire goal was to get rid of those danged Protestants. He didn't want to blow up Parliament while being the first person to scream "anarchy in the UK." He had a very clear idea of the government that he wanted to replace the current one with. The group of conspirators were kinda basically the Catholic version of religion-based terrorist cell. Additional fun facts that don't contribute to him being a jerk. He was just the guy who got caught, since he was the one in charge of setting the fuse. He changed his name to Guido when he was in Spain trying to muster up help to dismantle the Protestant powers in England. Che Guevara, who helped Fidel Castro overthrow the Cuban government and has since become the poster boy for revolution. Anyone who spoke against the revolution was taken by his guerrilla, murdered and buried. They would then return the burial address to their widows. Frank Lloyd Wright. There are many stories of him not paying people and how much of an ass he was because of his ego. He told his boss, Sullivan, to give him a 5-year contract and enough money for a house which he built on the outskirts of Chicago, and then started designing homes behind Sullivan's back for wealthy clients. He left his first wife and 6 kids for a client's wife, and they went to Europe for a year. He came back, got money from his mom, and settled in Wisconsin. It was there that a servant set the house/studio on fire and murdered Wright's second wife, her 2 children, and 4 others. Wright married again, but she was addicted to morphine and was divorced after a year or so. Despite charging high-end clients a lot of money, he was always short on money because he brought a lot of art, which was destroyed in the fires at his home/studio. There are also stories of him being rude to clients and telling them to stick it. Amazing architect, though. Probably anyone before 1960 we praise was damn near absolutely a racist. Plenty after too, for that matter. It's a hard question because of moral relativity. Is it okay to judge past people by modern standards? Furthermore, as Lord Atton said, paraphrased, great men are almost always bad men. Great men like Julius Caesar, Alexander the Great, Genghis Khan were undoubtedly genocidal by today's standard. Also, the question of what constitutes bad. Gandhi was a racist. Mother Teresa espoused Catholic doctrine and taught the poor complacency while bringing in money for the church that could have better been spent to improve the lives of those she purported to help. Martin Luther King Jr. cheated on his wife. Short answer, all of them. Great and good people are still only human. They all had flaws.
What was the most shocking thing you heard the quiet kid say? In class, he asked the woman teacher if he could go to the toilet. She sternly replied, "You've got 2 minutes, Richard." And Richard says, 2 minutes? It takes me that long to unravel it. Teacher goes red and everyone loses it. We were having a bullcrap elective course and we ran out of stuff to do, so we wound up having story time. My friend walks up to the front and starts telling us about how once he got pretty badly injured. Basically, he was walking into his friend's house, slipped on some black ice, face planted on it, and his front teeth tore off most of his front lip and broke off. He ran into the house babbling and bleeding. He was like 11 and missing part of his face, so he wasn't 100% coherent at the time. And his friend's mom takes one look, runs into her bedroom, locks the door, and doesn't do anything until my friend's dad arrives and starts screaming at her. My friend says he still has no idea why the grown adult woman couldn't handle the situation any better, and we all start making guesses and bullcrap psychoanalysis. Cue the quiet kid raising his magnificent head and blessing us with enlightenment. Maybe she just needed to finger herself real quick. So this one kid, who barely ever said 2 words one day, asked the teacher for the time. It was at some after-school thing and there was no clock. The teacher says the classic, "Time for you to get a watch," which for some reason was funny to everyone else. The quiet kid doesn't laugh. He looks the teacher dead in the eyes, and once everyone quieted down, he says, "So are you gonna tell me the freaking time or what?" We were in like 7th grade. In class we were studying genetics and one guy was being a real jerk and the teacher couldn't get him to shut up. Then, after discussing inbreeding in dogs, one quiet kid raises his hand and says, "So is this likely how Peter became so freaking stupid?" The jerk kid who constantly screwed with people was in line with the quiet kid and the quiet kid's friend. The quiet kid is a bit overweight, so when he gets up to the lunch lady and gets his chicken nuggets, the jerk says, "You don't want extra nuggets, big guy?" The quiet kid out of nowhere just starts ranting. "No, I'm all set, but what are you up to this weekend? You want to hang out, grab some food, maybe screw a bit? I like to be on top and you look like a bottom. What do you say, want to screw tonight?" The entire line is dead silent. The jerk starts getting all mad and acting like he's going to start a fight, and the quiet kid says, "Okay, fine, you can be top, baby." The jerk kid leaves to the entire line laughing their butts off at his expense. No idea if the quiet kid was gay or he just knew that even jokingly suggesting the jerk kid was a homosexual would upset him more than anything. But I do know he left the line with his delicious chicken nuggets and a huge smile on his face. Quiet guy I work with never said much until he came up to me and asked, "What happens when an Eskimo is pleasured?" Before I get the chance to respond, he throws a handful of ice at me and walks away. In junior high, in the mid-'80s, the game Trivial Pursuit was all the rage. We played it in math class one day, and this kid, Gary, who never said anything at all, totally spanked everyone else by answering every single sports-related trivia question. He got a lot of attention for it, and I believe he walked a little taller after that day. I don't think I ever heard him say anything else, but I did see him sitting on the bleachers at a few sports events. The quiet kid from my grade stood up one day, grabbed a broom, stood on a chair, and began trying to swat bees that got inside. One bee landed on the window where quiet kid proceeded to yell, "Die, bee! Die!" and then swatted and shattered the window. He screeched when it happened and then sat back down. Never heard him speak again. One of my students hardly said a word all year until a couple of weeks ago. I was trying to get a group of talkative ones under control and she had enough. She yells out, "Shut the heck up! I'm trying to work, you freaking jerks!" Awkward silence followed because I didn't know how to handle the normally studious and quiet one losing it. I was like this in middle school. Not exactly quiet, but I never really socialized except with people right beside me in the form of asking for a pencil. One day, the classroom jerk happened to be more jerky than I could stand for, and I stood up out of my seat and yelled at him and sat back down. The entire class fell silent, but he never got that jerky again. I was best friends with the quiet kid in middle school. It wasn't so much shocking as the stupidest thing I've heard him say. He got this 1,000-yard stare all of a sudden and just said, "I can't remember what color my dog is." My dad is very quiet, to the point that it makes most people uncomfortable, even me sometimes. One day we're at the park and a woman walks past us and my dad quickly says, "What if I punched that woman in the face and said, 'Sorry, I thought you were my wife'?" In high school, there was this really quiet girl named Grace. She was a pleasant person, but wouldn't say anything more than hi or sorry unless you asked her something. Even then, she'd appear terrified. It was at prom, and I was in the parking lot of the venue we had prom at. I lost a contact and had to run to my car to grab my glasses. In the parking lot, Grace was smiling and walking from her car. She looked at me, laughed, and said, "My prom date just pleasured the heck out of me." I still laugh about it to this day. He started to attack someone in my class with a table when the teacher got a cup of coffee. That was quite something. Wait, he attacked another guy with a table? That's like a whole new level of angry right there. I was in marching band in high school, probably 7 years ago now, and we had this huge muscular guy as our brass instructor. He would always yell at us to nail these chords or, "You're not playing loud enough." There was this little Asian trumpet kid that was so innocent and nice, he hardly ever spoke a word. One really hot afternoon, our instructor was being especially loud and said, "Why don't the trumpets blow hard enough?" Dead silence across the field as all the brass are waiting for next instructions. Then we hear, "What doesn't your mom blow me hard enough?" from quiet trumpet kid. Needless to say, we all laughed, got push-ups, and laughed some more. Wow, literally this question came at a perfect time. I was just thinking about this, and it was by far in sophomore year of high school. This kid was so odd that honestly, no one ever really noticed him, but one day he's sitting across from me at a table, and he sees this one girl in really tight shorts and goes, "Man, I could have my head up her butt for months." It was pretty shocking. 72 virgins is nowhere near enough virgins for eternity. That's like a week's worth of virgins. I went to middle school and high school with this boy named Daniel. Never once heard him say a word. A friend of mine said he would whisper sometimes. The night of our senior party, we heard some music coming over from the corner where the karaoke machine was set up. At first, no one really noticed him because people had been singing on it all night, and most people stopped paying attention. But this was different because no one was singing and the music was playing. The DJ stopped the music and started the song again. Daniel was standing there looking frightened. But this time around, when the song started, he began to sing. Everyone in the room stopped what they were doing and just crowded around him. He wasn't a great singer by any means, but 99% of the people in the room hadn't ever heard him talk. When the song was over, everyone started clapping and cheering, and he walked away with a big smile on his face. I actually really like that story. No matter what you do, there are always people who will support you. In kindergarten, there was this kid, Donatel, and he never said a word. He was nice enough, played games and everything, but completely silent. One day we were looking out the classroom window as a cop drove by. Donatel opens his mouth and says, "Police car." At the time, we were all excited to hear him speak, but looking back, that kid must have had some real dark history. In high school, I had first level Spanish with this kid who was super quiet. At the end of the year, we all had to give a speech in Spanish in front of the entire class. This dude stood up and gave a speech, not in Spanish, but in a language that he had spent the entire year inventing. Playing rugby, hooker fails completely at line out. Someone shouts jokingly, "Does anyone know any good hookers to replace Patrick?" Quiet to score on the team. Never hear him say anything. Maybe Patrick's mum can help. Proceed to fall on floor. So this isn't so much what he said. The seniors played locker pinball with the underclassmen. It's exactly what it sounds like. They bounced one little guy constantly, made him late for class a lot because they keep him bouncing so long. Well, one day, they were bouncing him and he super politely said, "Please stop, you're hurting me." Obviously, the seniors bounced him harder. Apparently, that was this kid's breaking point because he leapt onto the nearest senior, who just happened to be our star basketball forward. The little freshman bit into the senior's neck and literally tore a mouthful of skin off. He just stood there with this piece of bloody skin on his shirt, growling at everyone. Needless to say, no one ever screwed with Mad Dog Mike after that. Jeremy. This guy was so silent that we believed he was a mute. The school had just recently painted the bins in all kind of weird styles. As our group was walking somewhere at lunchtime, we passed a bin that was covered in handprints. He offhandedly goes, "That bin is handy," leaving us dumbfounded at his pun bomb. We sat in the classroom, I think in 5th grade. My friend had done a PowerPoint presentation about Eminem. He talked about that he lived in a trailer as a young boy, and the quiet straight A student stands up and says, "Just like you," and asks to use the toilet. No one understood anything of what just happened. We live in North Europe. It's practically no one that lives in a trailer here. My friend didn't. If anything, I think that student was just looking for an excuse to be out of pocket. This one is pretty serious, so just a fair warning. Nothing. Let me explain. I took a class with Sung Hui Cho, the Virginia Tech shooter, one semester before the shooting. The class was called Contemporary Horror. It was a one-time elective offered by my favorite professor. We read horror novels and watched horror films and discussed the craft of creating scary stories, but also how they reflected or represented their era's fears. It was a great class. There were only about 15 students and it was discussion-heavy. Cho was one of them. I honestly never noticed him, even in that small class, until halfway into the semester. He wasn't quiet, he was silent. So on the day we all finally noticed him, our professor asked him something directly, and Cho just stared at him. I can't remember the question, but the nature of it meant silence was potentially an acceptable and funny response, so we all laughed. Except Cho. He just kept staring at our professor. Our laughter awkwardly died, and after a few moments of uncomfortable silence, our professor just said, "Okay," and moved on. It was so strange, but I forgot about that weird moment until after his rampage. That professor later told me that Cho's papers had been disturbing, but the nature of our course meant the envelope was being pushed a bit, and it had never been bad enough to suggest he do what he did. That professor was a good man, and he admitted he struggled with not blaming himself on some level for 1, not identifying how severe Cho's mental health problems were, and 2, for the graphic and terrible nature of some of what we watched in that class, which may have inspired Cho. He knew that it was bullcrap, but a part of him couldn't help but feel some blame. It was terribly sad. Hopefully this next story will lighten some things up. There was this one quiet girl in my class, and she would never say anything. This was around 3rd or 4th grade, but I would always try and get her to talk. I would be nice, like when she had no paper in her binder, I'd take notice and give her some before she can ask. When she was searching for a pencil in her bag, I gave her an extra one I had. It was like small little acts, picking up her pencil when she dropped it, etc. Then at lunch, this kid was picking on me. I was short, weak, and very emotional back then. She came out of nowhere and told the guy, "I'll give you 3 seconds to walk away." I was stunned because those were the first words I've ever heard her say. The guy slapped me, and she did a straight kick to his balls after that. I was honored, and shocked she ever said anything. She never said anything after that, but I did say thanks. Texted friend that I did get to keep in touch with from work back then. She said that Quiet Girl moved shortly after I did. She did have Quiet Girl's number, I called it, and it came up with "this landline has been disconnected." Now I'm struggling even more. I need to find this girl. The girl I texted, though, didn't even know her last name. No one really did, I guess. What high school she goes to is still unknown. Where she lives, still unknown. All is not lost, though. I'm still waiting on a Facebook Messenger reply to see if another girl knows her last name. I did try just typing in her first name on Facebook, and I probably typed Elena's name 100 different ways and found nothing. She's not able to be publicly searched on Facebook. Neither am I, but geez, it sucks. I have one last hope. If you can all cross your fingers with me, it might just work. I learned that I won't be able to talk to her. Through a list of people I got her mom's number, her mom apparently remembered me by name, and then she said that she is, in circumstances caused by family, not letting her talk to anyone or go anywhere for a while. I never was able to find out why, but, it sucks. I'll update if I ever talk to her. If I ever see her, I'll take a photo with her. Tomorrow, I'm going to try to talk to her mom again to find out what happened. Thanks for the help, Reddit. If I ever marry her, I will share anything but her body and love with you. Thanks again, Reddit, for all y'all who have cared about my little story. As someone pointed out, it's been 5 months, and I want to add very little has changed. She and I still aren't exactly allowed to talk. I've talked to her mom a couple of times. I've talked to her once, and it's been better than the silence between the years. I've learned things like her current height and seen a picture of her, one she took when we got to chat once. But it doesn't look like there's much to work with in talking to her. Her mother was deemed unfit to parent or something like that in court against her dad's parents. I haven't asked about her dad, but I assume he's dead or ran off. I changed some of the things in this edit to avoid having too much info about her there, but I know I won't be able to take any of it down from the internet for good. So far, it looks like the only chance I'll get to talk to her again is when she turns 18 in a year and a half. Everyone, send your energy to that guy. We gotta get those two together. It's meant to be. One thing I always say, as a quiet guy, is whenever people are talking about me within earshot, they usually say something like, "That guy, he just never talks." Then I say, "No, but I hear everything." They all just kind of laugh awkwardly and slither away. I think it's weird how my lack of conversation is such a huge conversation starter. Our quiet kid was Tommy. Tommy never said anything ever. Out of all of the lunches we ate at our table senior year, I think Tommy was the only one who never told a story or even added anything to the conversation. He just always sat in the same spot along the wall, eating his lunch and laughing occasionally at our jokes. One day, we were sitting in the cafeteria eating lunch and sharing stories like we always do. My friend Raymond had spent the previous night with a girl named Haley. She was 2 years younger, but already had a reputation of hooking up with a lot of different guys. So he was telling us everything that went down, kind of bragging, even though nobody was really impressed as we were aware of Haley's reputation. Anyways, Raymond gets done telling his story, then proceeds to pull out a sandwich. I think it was some sort of fish. It didn't look very appealing to Raymond or us, so he says, "This looks disgusting, but I'll give it a try anyways," and proceeds to take a bite. In pipes Tommy, "Is that what you said about Haley last night?" Everyone explodes into laughter, drawing the attention to the entire cafeteria. Raymond is just sitting there mid-bite, stunned. I'm bent over in pain from laughing. Others are on the floor. One guy ran to the bathroom because he thought he was going to puke from laughing. Even Ray had to laugh. I never noticed him laugh, but Tommy had this sly grin on his face the rest of the lunch hour. I was, and still am, a geek, and I got bullied a lot in school. The Columbine massacre happened when I was in 8th grade, and all of a sudden, everyone started thinking a bit more carefully about the ramifications of spending years physically and psychologically torturing kids who were too small or afraid to fight back. I didn't make the connection at the time. The bullying kind of fizzled out for me in high school, and I just thought it was because everyone was getting more mature and empathetic and growing less cliquey, and I was delighted that some of the popular people were suddenly being so generous and friendly with me. It wasn't until one of these people asked me if I'd kill her if I brought a gun to school and shot everyone, I realized that a lot of the recent kindness the popular kids were suddenly displaying towards me was not necessarily coming from a genuine place. I was deeply insulted that anyone ever thought I would do anything like that, and deeply hurt that the other kids didn't actually like me. They were just afraid of me, and were being nice to me out of fear. A lot of the other established nerdy kids were in the same boat as me, including this one kid, Pat. I didn't know him very well, but he was frail, pale, bespectacled, highly intelligent, and quiet as a church mouse, so he was already on my radar as a potential ally. We were in an SAT prep course together, and I started sitting next to him. He didn't say much of anything to me or anyone for a few weeks. Then, one day as we were all settling in and waiting for the teacher, one of the popular girls who was particularly bubbly and not particularly gifted with intelligence said, "Pat, I used to think you were going to come to school and shoot everyone, but now I know I was wrong." Pat looked down towards his desk, stroked his chin thoughtfully, and said, "We'll see." And the rest is history. Pat and I are still close friends to this day. Freshman, innocent, quiet girl on the spikes on top of German helmets from the war. "They look like painful butt plugs." We were chilling in a bar in Prague, and someone rolled up some hash oil and tobacco and passed it around. The quiet kid hit it and got even quieter. 20 minutes later, some aggressive growling black metal comes on, and out of nowhere he yells, "Kill your parents!" We absolutely lost it. He was pretty happy with himself. I'm the quiet kid. One day, before my economics class started, this guy turned around at his desk and asked me what I thought he'd be when he grew up. He never took anything seriously and joked around a lot, so I answered, definitely a porn star. The girl next to me started laughing really hard, and even when class started, she didn't stop. The teacher walked over to her and asked her what she was laughing about. When she finally calmed down to answer, she said, "He said that Daniel's gonna be a porn star," and the whole class heard it. Everybody, including my teacher, was staring at me with shocked looks on their faces. I turned bright red and couldn't find any valid excuse for what I'd said, and that's why I never talk. I'm not overly quiet, but I had a similar moment where I got ratted out by someone in class. A football player who sat next to me in English, who was not known for his intelligence, but had a good humor about it, got an A on a test. He was shocked and bemused, as were the rest of us. I said, "What, did you screw Mrs. Brown?" And everyone around us starts laughing. Mrs. Brown asks what's funny, in a non-hostile way, and I just pass it off as a dumb joke. But then Stephanie, the tattling quim in front of me, tells her exactly what I said. So then I'm out in the hall with my 50-something English teacher who was asking why I, who was such a nice boy who would say something like that, freaking suck-ups. I wasn't there, but in my announcing techniques class, teaches you how to present yourself and speak for radio and television, we were filming how-to videos in the studio, and the professor was telling us past examples of good and bad projects. One in particular was done by a very shy, awkward kid who came to the studio with a friend and a metal box. He so casually proceeds to pull a bunch of knives out of the box and film his video on the best ways to use the knives in combat, with very specific and effective ways to kill somebody using his friend as a dummy. He was very volatile with his movements, and his friend apparently didn't even bat an eye. The professor then explained that despite how uncomfortable it made him and the rest of the class, he had to give him an A because his presentation was actually put together pretty well. Quiet kid sneezes. Boy behind her, "God bless you." Her, "God isn't real." An annoying friend, "Dylan, you're so freaking stupid sometimes." Dylan, "At least I don't suck massive eggplant all the time." Someone once turned to me and said, "Dude, you're always so quiet, like a serial killer or something." I immediately responded, "Thank you." Looks of shock and horror as I realized what I said. In college, our fraternity had a pledge who was clearly awkward with girls, but was otherwise a real cool guy. Normally, Dan was super proper and a bit shy when talking to girls, but not this night. On this night, when Dan was asked about what kind of girl he wanted to date, he told our sweetheart, "The kind of girl who loves to be crushed." I'm not sure if Dan ever crushed, but that line became a staple in our frat for a while. I will never forget this as long as I live. It was like perfect cinema in real life. This quiet, weird girl in 10th or 11th grade always wore this giant coat and looked messy. She was a bigger girl and had a sister who was super pretty and skinny and popular. As I type this out, I realize it sounds fake or like a movie. Anyway, this big, awkward, quiet, friendless girl shows up at a talent show at the school. People weren't being obviously mean, but there was definitely an air of what the heck when she came out on stage in her big, messy coat and disheveled clothes. She sat on the piano and started to play and sing and just... my God, it was surreal. She sang this haunting bluesy song no one had ever heard before, and the auditorium just went dead silent. I distinctly remember tearing up, and I'm tearing up 20 years later now just remembering it. Who the heck knew? In middle school, the quiet kid Steven had an arch rival, Robbie. In class, Robbie always seemed to come out on top of their little scuffles, mostly because Steven couldn't really formulate or execute a burn or a comeback. He just rolled over and let Robbie get his insults in until the teacher stepped in. One day, I was walking behind Robbie after that class, and Stephen Lee quietly crept up behind him. Before Robbie could even turn around, he got as close as possible and said, "If I was to come into your house and kill you while you were sleeping, I doubt anyone would even notice." Then he disappeared into the darkness of the science hallway. I don't remember the exact words, but that was pretty darn close. I was about 55% shocked, 30% laughing hysterically on the inside, and 15% terrified. Robbie never made fun of old Stevie again. I caught him looking at not safe for work My Little Pony pictures on his phone. That was awkward. I was a substitute teacher for a year after college. There was a 7th grade girl that all the other girls adored. At the age of 13, she was already a fake tan cheerleader and thought the world of herself and cared little for her classmates. One day in study hall, she was bragging, lying, to her friends about her string of boyfriends. The other girls were hanging on to every word she said. We'll call her Cordelia. Now, to set the necessary geography of this scene, there was a very quiet boy at the computer in the back of the classroom. He hadn't said a word all period. Anyway, "I just want to date a boy that's dumber than me. That way, he'd do whatever I want because all he wants is, you knows." Cordelia, if you were dating anyone dumber than you would be pushing him around in a wheelchair and wiping drool off his face. Immediately, Cordelia looked at me, dumbfounded. She expected me to yell at him or send him to the office. No matter how hard I tried, I could not stop laughing. It was the most hysterical thing I'd heard all year. My friend told me about how they were watching Little Shop of Horrors in their theater class. There was this one kid who nearly never said anything, but apparently during one of the scenes with tentacles or vines or something, I've never actually seen it myself, out of nowhere this kid says to the class, "Well, I've seen enough hentai to know where this is going."
Doctors who have given a second opinion diagnosis, what is the worst first opinion you've ever encountered? I'm a surgeon. Most patients come to me after having seen another physician who has diagnosed them with something and told the patient to see a surgeon. I've been called to see more than one patient for appendicitis who has already had an appendectomy. I've also been called in multiple cases for patients who very obviously have previously undiscovered very advanced cancer. It's always too far advanced for me to be of help, so I have to wonder, am I being called so I can be the bad guy and explain everything? Yes. The answer is yes. This is the opposite answer, but the best request for a second opinion came from a CVS Minute Clinic. Young, healthy law student goes to Minute Clinic. Has the flu, this was a few years ago, no Rona, feels awful. They check him out, yup, he has a fever, aches, sore throat, it's the flu, flu swab positive. His clinic vitals were notable for a heart rate of 140, a bit high, but not crazy high. Reassuring numbers are under 100. The guy otherwise walks into the CVS and is a healthy young guy. Would have been pretty easy to dismiss it. Anyway, the Minute Clinic says go to the ER, you need an EKG. So the guy follows orders. ER chief complaint is, I have the flu and CVS told me to come here. ER gets an EKG and he's in slow VT, which is a life-threatening arrhythmia that you have to be shocked out of. They take a look at his heart and it was giant and barely moving. He had an insane myocarditis. Dude ended up getting cannulated for ECMO within hours, cardiac bypass machines as life support. I can't say all Minute clinics are the same, but holy crap, that was a great save. I'm a gynecologist. The number of times I've seen patients pregnant and upset or happy because some other doctor told them they can't get pregnant, so they didn't use birth control, is appalling. Usually, it's family med. Not ragging on all FM docs, just how it goes. I then have to explain that even if the patient has whatever condition that makes it unlikely for them to get pregnant, the odds are almost never 0%. Maybe less than 1%, but still not a zero, so of course it can happen. Well, when I first started feeling sick on the October of 1 year at college, I had a non-productive cough, night sweats and trouble sleeping, and I lost some weight. The school nurse gave me Claritin. All of those symptoms got worse, plus I was incredibly fatigued, my lymph nodes swelled up, and I had pretty bad backaches. My GP took a chest x-ray and prescribed antibiotics for pneumonia. At this point, I had almost failed out of school because I was only managing an hour or two of sleep per night. It took until spring break for me to go see a pulmonary specialist. He could instantly tell that it wasn't pneumonia. I had stage 4B Hodgkin's lymphoma. My first PET scan showed cancerous cells and lymph nodes in all 4 quadrants of my body. At this rate, I had lost about a third of my body weight. The cough, weight loss, and back pain were my swollen lymph nodes pressing on my lungs, stomach, and my back. They gave me my first round of chemo and I felt genuinely incredible. I felt like such crap that an IV mix of carefully measured toxins was an improvement. I went home and ate a whole pizza. Chemo got crappier, but it worked, so I guess I can't complain too much. I'm a lawyer, but had a client given a devastating diagnosis of an extremely rare heart condition. Doctor told him he had 6 weeks to live. He contacted me to make his will and set his affairs in order. Thankfully, he sought a second opinion with an extremely well-known cardiologist. I guess the cardiologist was intrigued due to the rare nature of the heart condition. There was nothing wrong with him. He was fine. This poor guy and his family were tortured over this, so devastated and terrified, for nothing. He actually called me to tell all of this. He seemed to still be in a joyous, I'm not going to die stage, but I imagine anger comes at some point when you take stock of what you went through. I don't know how a doctor flips up that massively, or if somehow my client's results were mixed up with someone else's. And some poor fellow's number is almost up and they don't even know it. Patient. When I was in college, I went to the doctor because I was peeing razors. It progressed pretty rapidly, and by the end of the week, I couldn't walk or sleep. The doctor asked me about my romantic life, and I told him the truth that my girlfriend and I had only been with each other and together for many years. He sort of scoffed at that and told me it was likely chlamydia. He had a long condescending speech about safe, fun times with me and then sent me home. A week later, my pee tests were back. Turns out I had the worst bladder infection they'd ever seen. I had to have a camera shoved up my pee hole, multiple rounds of antibiotics, and to this day I struggled to pee due to irreversible damage in the infection caused. I don't know about you listeners, but the story made the narrator feel sympathy pain in his nether regions. I have one that happened to me. I did college gymnastics. My senior year I had an accident in practice landing on my neck. Went to the hospital, got x-rays, was told I was perfectly fine, walked around in pain for a while, Weeks later, went to another doc, got a new set of images. My neck was broken in 3 places and had a dislocation. Had a multi-level fusion surgery days later. Found out my x-rays got swapped with someone else's in the ER, and I was originally diagnosed based on someone else's images. This was found out when I went to get my recordings long after my surgery for insurance purposes, and had my files and someone else's medical records and images in it. Because of the time I spent walking around with it, I have had a posterior surgery instead of anterior, which is way more invasive and gives me major issues to this day. Not a doctor. My husband had a situation where he almost died because of misdiagnosis. To preface this, at the time, we were young in our mid-20s, living in a college town. My husband had horrible pain, on floor, on hands and knees, horrible. We went to the ER and the doctor barely looked at him and just told him to stop drinking and it would be fine. We go home, the pain is getting worse and now he is vomiting. As soon as the doctor's office opens back home, where we grew up, we drove 1.5 hours to see our primary care. Within 15 minutes of walking into the GP office, my husband was rushed to emergency surgery. His gallbladder had almost completely ruptured and he was going septic. It was a total mess and he almost died because of a misdiagnosis. Obligatory, I am not the doctor, but the patient. I went to a sleep doctor because I was constantly tired and falling asleep standing up and such. Serious stuff. Doctor was like, well, you're overweight, so it's definitely sleep apnea. I did a sleep study, came back negative for sleep apnea. Doctor was like, well, I'm still positive it's sleep apnea because you're a porker. So he sent me home with a CPAP machine for a month. After a month of using the machine, which records your sleep apnea events every night, and still said I didn't have sleep apnea, and with me having zero improvement in my symptoms, I went back to him and he said, well, if this isn't working, I can't help you, because you obviously have sleep apnea, since all tubbos have sleep apnea, so you must not be using the CPAP. So I dropped him like a fresh turf and went to get a second opinion. New sleep doc, new sleep study. Came back and the new doctor says, yeah, this is textbook narcolepsy. You have all the symptoms and the sleep study proves it beyond a shadow of a doubt. I told him about the other doctor and he said, this is obviously narcolepsy. Your previous doctor was a moron. And unlike the other quotes in this story, this is an actual direct quote. I'll never forget the look of disgust on his face when he said the word moron. Not a doctor, but my sister was suffering from headaches and minor seizures for a while. Went to an urgent care and they told us that she had an anxiety disorder and just needed something to calm her down. We got a second opinion at the ER and turns out she had stage 4 brain cancer. I miss her every day. Wow, we trust doctors for so much and I'm sure that they're doing their best with the time they have. But stories like this, consider a second opinion sometimes, folks. I just left a practice partly because a woman brought her 8-month-old in for a second opinion. The practice owner had seen the rapidly enlarging sacral soft tissue mass, which the mother first noticed about 6 weeks prior. He told her not to worry about it. I checked his notes, which read, plan, ignore. I was shocked. There was a new onset rapidly enlarging blue-purple cystic mass on the baby's sacrum. It looked like a small plum under the skin at the top of her bum crack. And without any investigation, my colleague dismissed it. I was appalled. The mother was relieved. This wasn't the first not great judgment I've seen, but it was one of the worst. I realized I couldn't work in a clinic where I'd be stepping on other doctors' toes and couldn't trust their judgment. The babies had an imaging and a referral to a pediatric surgeon, but unfortunately I don't know the outcome because I'm working elsewhere now. Obligatory, I'm not a doctor, but when I had my wisdom teeth out, it was pretty brutal. Like they had to put me completely under, dig deep into my jawbone, the teeth were coming in sideways and upside down, just like the worst case scenario. So I have the surgery and the next couple of days I'm in a lot of pain, which happens. And I realize I have this growing hot lump on the side of my jawbone. Me being a dumbass, I tried to be like, oh, it'll go away. But it didn't, and my mum caught sight of it, and took me back to the guy who did my surgery. Dentist dude took an x-ray and without even examining it or asking any questions first, said I was fine and it was probably just scar tissue and told me to leave. I thought, hey, well, he's smarter than me, so I guess he's right. My mother, however, did not think this. And so off we go for a second opinion, and while we're headed over to the other office, the hard lump in my jaw bursts and blood and pus leaks everywhere in my mouth. It was so effing gross. My mum immediately turned around, drove back to the dental surgeon, dragged me, who was still spitting blood and pus, barged into the office and made the dental surgeon look in my mouth. The dental surgeon muttered something about hysterical women seeing things that weren't there, but prescribed me antibiotics and more pain meds anyway. And that was how the 1 to 2 week recovery took an entire month, and I ended up having to drop out of a college course due to missing so much. I tasted this story. My uncle-in-law went to multiple doctors about leg pain and trouble walking. He's a big guy, and every doctor told him in more or less condescending ways that his issue was that he needed to lose weight. After 5 years, he finally got someone to MRI him, and it turned out he had a, by then, grapefruit-sized tumor in his leg. He unfortunately died about 6 months later because it metastasized. Yeah, being overweight is unhealthy, but seriously, F all those doctors that wouldn't believe he was in pain and just saw a fat person. Not a doctor, it was my doctor. I was a child and had a lot of trouble with abdominal pain. Mum kept taking me to the doctors, and he kept minimizing it, saying there was nothing wrong. Went on for a long time until I was doubled over in pain outside school one day. Mum asked me if it was hurting, and I told her it always hurt, and I just told her when it was really bad. She took me straight to my doctor's surgery and demanded I got looked into further, figuring a 5-year-old child shouldn't be living in constant pain. A few scans later, and I was immediately whisked into surgery. My mum still can't think of me being wheeled into the theatre when her and the doctors did not even actually know what exactly was wrong and what they were going to do. The plan was to open me up, figure out the exact issue, and go from there. I had an extra growth on my kidney, which was all infected, an extra ureter that was infected the whole way along. The doctor who had continually fobbed my mum off as a panicking parent whose child has nothing wrong with them actually ended up making a house visit to apologize. I went to the ER for some crazy stomach pain, and the doc there said it was because my thyroid was super inflamed. The thing is, I don't have a thyroid. I was born without one, and I take meds every day because of this. I tell her this, and she says, "No, that can't be true, your thyroid is enormous," and sent me to do an ultrasound. Lo and behold, it's not there. She refused to believe this and asked my primary doctor to explain my seemingly crazy anatomy. He goes, "Yeah, he doesn't have a thyroid." Turns out what she thought she saw was actually my Adam's apple, which I guess is sorta big. I had a period of about a year where I was getting constant UTIs, which is apparently, as a woman in her 20s, is normally caused by not peeing after doing it. I'm still not sure what was causing mine, but I was not active in the bedroom at all due to vaginismus. My doctor was away for school holidays, and stupidly, I thought I could last a week until she was back. Nope, 2 days later, I could barely move from the couch in pain, so I called a doctor. This doctor, a home doctor because it was a public holiday, refused to hand over the script until I acknowledged that I was being sexually irresponsible. When I said, "I am a virgin," embarrassing and potentially dangerous statement to make with a strange man in my house while I was home alone, this jackass laughed his ass off and said, "No, you're not. Nobody is at this age. Stop pretending to be all innocent." Slammed the prescription on my coffee table and walked out, refusing to give me the starter dose that they're required to carry, for people like me who are alone and can't get the prescription until the first dose kicks in enough to begin helping. I called the office to complain, and he did get reprimanded. But holy heck was I embarrassed. Not a doctor. My grandmother fell from her horse one day. Not a terrible fall, but from the way she landed, she wanted to get checked out. She felt she had really jolted her spine and neck, and was an older lady with fragile bones. Her doctor looked things over, gave her one of those soft neck cushion things, and sent her home. A couple days later, she decided to get a second opinion. No real reason, she just hadn't felt listened to by the first guy. The second doctor basically took one look at her x-rays and freaked out. He told her they needed to get her immediately into a brace to immobilize her spine. I googled to try and figure out what it was. I think it was a halo brace, but in my memory it's bigger and more metal than what I was seeing in the pictures. Basically, she had broken her neck, the same injury that paralyzed Christopher Reeve, but she wasn't paralyzed because the vertebrae hadn't dislocated. The second doctor said anything that did dislocate it, another minor fall, twisting wrong in bed, would mean being permanently paralyzed from the neck down. She wore her intense metal brace that kept her spine in place for a few months, and was totally fine. She lived another 15 years after that. But I think about that story often. The second doctor saved her mobility and freedom. Not a doctor, but I second opinioned the doctor I had for 2 years in high school. He diagnosed me, gave me the medical certificates and drugs for pleurisy, twice, glandular fever, shingles, tonsillitis, despite no tonsils, and malaria. 5 different diseases within 2 years for an otherwise healthy 16-year-old girl. My teachers would read these medical certificates and go, 2 weeks off for malaria? Just after you recovered from your bout of glandular fever too? Very unfortunate. Clearly not buying a word of it. It was ridiculous. I specifically remember with the shingles one telling him that I have psoriasis, I've had for years, and I think it just popped up randomly on my ribs. He said, "No, it's shingles, and it's quite rare for a young person like yourself to contract it." But he gave me 2 weeks off, so I didn't try to fight it too hard. Dude clearly just found a medical license on the street and claimed it as his own. She's depressed because of work. No, Mom, she has schizophrenia. She has borderline personality disorder. Did you mean she is female and insisting there is something wrong with her when you want to write her off? Also, what she has is a brain tumor, so thanks for playing, but goodbye. He has anxiety. He has OCD, and I'm not sure how you missed it. It's not subtle. He just took some bad acid. Urine tests say no, and patient says he doesn't do drugs. And I get he's a teenager, but unless he took acid 4 months ago, while never being alone in the house because of lockdown, and it's only affecting him now by pixie magic, I guess, then I think what he has is psychosis, and I would like to admit him, please and thank you. Also, an infinite array of prisoners diagnosed as officers as making it up, when the answer was serious mental illness, but there's a reason I got the flip out of that job. I get the feeling that this is a prison care worker of some sort, they didn't mention it in the post. Nurse here. I cared for a woman who had been diagnosed with broken vertebrae. She was in a lot of pain, couldn't get her pain under control, and her blood pressure was very low. She'd lose consciousness and be very difficult to wake. I also couldn't get her doctor to answer the phone middle of the night. Something just felt off about the whole situation. He finally answered and demanded that we Narcan her, insisting we'd overdosed her on narcotics, following his orders. I then had a hysterical woman in a lot of pain, going in and out of consciousness. I finally walked down to the entrance of the hospital and grabbed the cardiologist, who came in at 4:30 a.m. for rounds, and said, "This isn't your patient, but I think he's going to die." He came upstairs with me, looked at her and her chart, grabbed the bed and rolled her to ICU himself. I have no idea how the conversation went between the cardiologist and her doctor. She didn't have a broken back, she had an aortic aneurysm, which caused the pain and the low pressure and the loss of consciousness. She died the next day. Doctors, if the nurse says something is wrong, you might want to lay your eyes on the patient rather than shouting orders through the phone. Oh, I have one. Not a doctor, but watch the biggest flip-ups ever. So, my sister is very tall, very thin, and very fit. She was in pre-season for her WNBL season, running medium distances. She had a sudden sharp pain in the left side of her chest, radiating arm pain and shortness of breath. She called an ambulance and was rushed to hospital. They did all the tests with the beep-beep machines and determined no heart attack, said she tore a muscle and sent her home. Welp, a week later she's still in pain and she swears she hears a hissing sound in her chest. She sees our GP. He listens to the chest, has her breathe in and out, goes, "You've torn your lung." She's a perfect candidate for a torn lung, tall, thin, fit. The GP was amazed the hospital didn't hear the tear. How do you miss a torn lung in the perfect candidate for a torn lung? I am a doctor, just not the right kind. When I was 20 or so, I started feeling dizzy, disorientated, tired all the time like I could never get enough sleep. My male family doctor literally patted me on the head and said I was just a type A young lady, and the problem was my monthlies gave me anxiety. Yeah, no, turns out I have a brain malformation that gives me epilepsy and associated narcoleptic episodes. He's since retired, unrelated, but he should have years ago. My coworker went to a free walk-in clinic once because he wasn't feeling really well. The doctor told him he either had a really bad cold or AIDS. Actual doctor here. Someone came in with a diagnosis of toxic shock syndrome by their nurse practitioner, was sent to the ER, lights and sirens. The NP called ahead to say how sick this kiddo was. Kid shows up, it's scabies. Like it was actually flipping scabies. Not even close to toxic shock syndrome. I literally sent the kid home within 30 minutes of them arriving. Yes, I did call the NP back and educated her on what toxic shock syndrome actually was, and what can cause it. The girl wasn't even asked if she used tampons. She didn't. I told the parents to switch to a different provider, preferably an MD/DO.
Parents of Reddit, how did your son or daughter's significant other win you over? There are enough threads about how you ended up hating your son's girlfriend or daughter's boyfriend, but what have they done to gain your support? When I was in 10th grade, a guy I liked came over. My dad heard him playing guitar, and apparently that's all it takes for my dad to fall in love. That was the only time we hung out. I'm 31. He still asks about that guy. I was supposed to be one of those good Asian daughters that didn't date until I finished college. I got rebellious in sophomore year and decided to keep dating the guy who took me to winter formal. Mom actually liked him. Dad refused to acknowledge him. One day, my dad mentioned he got a new car stereo and he was going to take it to Best Buy to have it installed. Boyfriend said, nope, let me handle it, and spent an entire Saturday afternoon installing the radio and cleaning up the wires in his dash. Dad loved him afterwards, basically treated him like his own son. Parents didn't even bat an eye afterwards when we started living in sin a couple of years later, but by that time he was an engineer, we were engaged, and I couldn't give a rat's behind. I had been casually seeing a guy for a couple of weeks when one night we were out to dinner and I was having a particularly homesick night. I live 15 hours from my family, and at this point I hadn't seen him in over 8 months. He joked and said that we should drive home and surprise my mom for Mother's Day that weekend. The next day, we were in the car driving. I've never seen my parents so surprised. Also a little worried. I think their initial thoughts were that something had gone terribly wrong and I was there to deliver the news. My parents have loved him ever since. Won my significant other's dad over by shaving him. We had a not too close relationship, always quite distant. After he suffered a stroke and was hospitalized, he couldn't move too well, and as he did not want to be washed and shaved by the nurses, and my significant other was not able to do this, it was my duty. Even though we couldn't really talk, I knew I got his approval. He said, take good care of her, and he died a few days later. On the bright side, this person has posted an update and says, yes, I'm still together with the girl, real family with 2 kids now. Not quite what was asked, but I knew I was there with my significant other's folks when her dad stopped giving me room temperature beers from the pantry and started giving me cold beers from the fridge. Upon meeting my teenage daughter's significant other, she was always embarrassed by me at that time, so she says, Dad, are you drunk? It's the middle of the day, and of course I wasn't drunk. I hesitate for a moment and then just answer, yes. Her new significant other looks at me completely straight-faced and says, same. Sense of humor wins me over. I won my boyfriend's, now husband's, parents over by throwing a party. It was his birthday and I had gotten a good number of people to show up for a surprise party. He was on the phone with his parents when he walked in and everyone yelled, surprise! He got all teary-eyed and told his parents, I have to go. It's a surprise party. I didn't know I had so many friends. For good measure, I sent them photos of the party as well. His mom particularly liked the set of photos that showed my SO and friends battling a bomb-shaped grill that apparently caught on fire and exploded. Apparently, making my SO smile. It seems that it was pretty rare enough for her mother to actually be surprised to see her smile. And now my top comment is about my wife. I'm the significant other of the daughter in this story. My girlfriend's dad basically hated me until the time we drove together down to Monterey from Austin and had to make conversation for 7 hours and pretend it wasn't awkward. He's an engineer, so I went with that and casually mentioned my desire to get a small CNC lathe for metal fabrication, or possibly build a basic XY controller to attach to a traditional lathe. Turns out his final project for graduation at college was to build a CNC lathe. We nerded out and started discussing the pros and cons of stepper motors versus servos, then the conversation moved to Arduinos, and the rest is history. Now we get along handsomely, and it makes my girlfriend very uncomfortable. My good friend got dumped by his girlfriend halfway through college after she cheated on him. Her dad called and said, my daughter is a freaking moron. You know there's always so-and-so, her 1-year younger sister. Pecan pie. Yes, fixing computers helped. Yes, him being a nice guy helped. But I swear my husband won over my entire family and extended family on his pie alone. Quote from every family meal ever before we got married. Is your boyfriend coming? Is he bringing that pecan pie? Now that we are married, hey, where's his pecan pie? You know you married a winner there. He makes great pies. My significant other bonded with my dad immediately by their mutual hatred of my older sister's ex-boyfriend, baby daddy. Actually, my younger sister also had a trash can of a BF at the time. So when my significant other showed up with a car, a stable job, and actually treated me with respect, it was like a miracle. I'll tell you the story of how my husband won over my dad. My dad has a sailboat, which he's kind of crazy about. My husband has a background in naval architecture. We went to visit my dad, and while we were on his boat in the marina, the guy in the slip next to us runs over. My boat is taking on water! Come help me bail it out! Don't worry, responds my father. My son-in-law is a naval architect. Something to note at this point in the story, my now husband and I had only been dating for like 8 months. We weren't even close to getting engaged, let alone married. But now all of a sudden, boyfriend is a son-in-law. So now husband just goes with it. Sure, I, the son-in-law, will see if I can help. He gets on the guy's boat and sees that there's water seeping through the floorboards. He thinks this is weird given that the pump is going and the boat isn't listing or anything. So he gets down, sticks his finger in the water, and licks it. It's fresh water, now husband says. Your bilge is leaking. Did you remember to turn the hose off after you finished filling up your freshwater tank? And that, my friends, is how my husband became a legend at Dad's Marina and my dad's favorite person of all time. Edit, because, despite being with my husband for almost 10 years now, I still know nothing about naval architecture. I know the exact moment I won my wife's family over. I could see it in her father's eyes. It was high school, before we started dating. The first time I went over to her house, actually. Her father and 2 brothers were all pretty tall, and I'm average height. It's a very alpha male household, and they had this thing they like to do to potential boyfriends. So when my wife left the room to go to the bathroom or whatever, all 3 of them stood, lined up shoulder to shoulder, and loomed over me, blank-faced, glaring down, no words, no motion, just staring and looming. I found out later that her last boyfriend almost cried when they did this to him. I've always been really socially awkward, but an odd part of that awkwardness is that I'm never intimidated by people. I don't know why, but they just don't frighten me. I slowly stood up, looking them all in the eye, and then poked her dad right in the tummy. I said, "Boop!" He stared for a second, and then a giant grin split his face. It turns out that he's a massive goofball. From that moment on, I was a member of the family. The whole dating and marriage thing was just a formality to them. My ex's father did something similar. I met the entire family except the father, who was working offshore. Then he came home one week and we were spending at her parents' place. We'd been there a while, had dinner, and I was talking to my ex's brother. Suddenly, everyone goes quiet and he's home now. All right, I thought, time to man the heck up. He enters, gives his wife and son some love, then his daughter, my ex, before he turns on to me. He stares me up and down and I say, "Hello, sir, nice to finally meet you," and extend my hand for a handshake. He takes it and grips it a bit harder than normal firm shakes. I squeeze just as much back, and that was that. Afterwards, my ex and her mother tells me how they've seen him do that to other guys my ex had brought home, and how they saw him deflate while looking me up and down. Mostly up, I'm 6'7", and that the handshake sealed the deal. I wasn't completely convinced, but later that year at Christmas, after dinner on Christmas Day, he came with beers and cognac, poured one for everyone and put the bottle on the table, saying something like, "Just pour yourself another when you want." Now, I'm more of a whiskey guy, but cognac is good too, and I was getting a bit of a buzz, so I took him up on it. As soon as he sees me reach for the bottle, he goes, "That's a good lad. How about you, son?" to his son. And the son/brother-in-law goes, "Nah, I'm good with the strong stuff for now," which launches the father into a joking tirade on how his son-in-law is a better drinker than his own son. That's when I knew. My ex later told me, we split on good terms, that her father had almost went ballistic when she told him we split up. I'm a martial arts instructor, among other things. I caught my daughter's boyfriend looking at my belt rack, 5th degree black belt, and trophies from when I was much younger. And he said, "Are all those yours?" "Yup." "So you know how to throw someone?" "Yup." "Could you teach me?" How much of a setup did I need? I took him into the backyard and threw his skinny butt around for about 45 minutes. And every time he hit the ground, he got back up with a huge smile and said, "That was awesome, show me how." So I took him to class with my daughter and had her practice throws on him. He never complained, never flinched, and never whined. After class, I told my daughter I liked him. So she broke up with him. So close. My wife won my parents over easily. Preface, had an old Rottweiler named Max that was young at heart but clearly showing his age. My previous girlfriends never petted him or gave him attention. He didn't crave it, but he wanted to be acknowledged. Fast forward a few years, and I bring my girlfriend, now wife, home for Christmas break. I introduced her to Max, and she immediately sat on the floor and rubbed him, petted him, and just gave him love that no other girlfriend gave him. I hadn't seen his little nub wag so quickly in a long time. He ended up falling asleep with his head in her lap. Max is no longer with us, but at least I got his approval before he passed. I will never forget that day. I'm tearing up just thinking about it. I am so happy to be reading this story because I love dogs. I love the thought of just petting on dogs and being their friend, and just having a dog's approval in the family is one of the most heartwarming experiences of all time. I have a huge smile on my face right now just reading that story. It was my parents, actually. When my mom first met my dad, he was working in an auto body repair shop, actually really good at what he does. Well, to surprise my mom's dad, he borrowed my grandfather's 1968 SS Camaro, which had been nearly totaled in a car wreck a few years back, and completely repaired it. When they first met, my dad shook my grandfather's hand, said, "Mr. Haynes, my name is Kevin. Why don't you come outside?" His Camaro was sitting outside looking almost brand new. My mom says that was the only time she has ever seen her dad cry. My fiance went over my parents individually, but nothing beats my stepdad. My stepdad loves fun facts, and they're always fairly obscure, and I can never answer them, but that only makes it more fun for him. So the three of us, fiance, stepdad, and I, are sitting around watching The Simpsons, and my stepdad goes, "Who's that band?" when Spanish Flea comes on. My fiance immediately answers with, "Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass." My stepdad was dumbfounded, and I'm pretty sure that's when our relationship got a seal of approval. My wife's dad told me I'm the only boyfriend he ever liked. He said my strategy of whenever I would call to talk to her and he answered the phone, instead of just saying, "Is my wife there?" or "Can I talk to my wife?" I would always say, "Hi, Mr. her dad, how are you?" and make brief small talk before asking for her. It wasn't a strategy, it's just how I was raised and/or Southern politeness, but it worked. As a Southerner myself, that's common courtesy. I worked in an ice cream shop with my current significant other, and her mom came in one night. Without knowing it was her mom at the time, me being friendly, I struck up a conversation with her while I got her ice cream and food for her. 3 months later, I started dating the girl I worked with, and I immediately recognized her mom when I met her for the quote-unquote first time. The first thing her mom said was, "Well, you already have my approval." I won over my now wife's parents by being able to socialize with them even though we didn't share a common language. We ended up doing some sort of pseudo-charades in order to get things ready for her birthday celebrations. Then I ate some particularly spicy food, which was apparently made just for me. When I ate it and didn't keel over on fire, they thought I was brave enough for their daughter. When I expressed how delicious it was and picked up 3 more, they knew I was part of the family.
Apparently fixing all of her family's computer and other technology-related problems doesn't help.
In college, I was sleeping with my then-boyfriend in his bed, with his roommate also sleeping in the same room 4 feet away, and I wet the bed for the first time since I was out of diapers. I woke up early, and after realizing what happened, tried to sneak out of bed. He woke up to find me humiliated, shaking, and then bursting into tears. He assured me everything was okay, he knew it was an accident, he was still very attracted to me, and let me shower first. When I told my mom how he handled it, she was sold. Now I have to convince her my current boyfriend is just as great. Not a parent, but I'll talk about how my white as Wonder Bread significant other found some common ground with my Middle Eastern parents. Eating meals together is a really important part of my culture. My current SO was willing to try anything and everything my mom put in front of him. My SO came from a household where his mother only ever cooked meat and potato types of meals, and they never ate out at restaurants, so he had a beginner's palate. Still, he tried everything from picked vegetables to rice with weird stuff in it, and even stews that looked like liquid poop. My mom is a sucker for anyone who will eat her food, so she started to like him a bit more after having him over for dinner. This story is about the little things. My now husband won over my mom forever when, after meeting for the first time at a college cocktail party, my parents were visiting for Parents' Weekend, he put his jacket over my shoulders when we all went outside. It was a brisk fall day and I was in a dress. She has always said she liked him from that moment on. 33 years later, she wasn't wrong. My boyfriend won my dad over by taking me to several different doctor's offices when I was having medical issues about a month after we started dating. He also stayed calm enough to speak with my parents on the phone and tell them what was going on while I was freaking myself out too much to talk. My dad has always said he likes him well enough with previous boyfriends, but has told me several times he likes my current boyfriend a lot and thinks he's a good guy. My grandmother has never liked any of my boyfriends. She has always told me flat out that she didn't really like them, which hurt me immensely but wasn't really out of character. Pretty much nothing I pursued or achieved was good enough for her. I resigned myself to the fact that she would never like anyone I brought home. She never really warmed up to my mother, even though my mom is an amazing human being. No one was good enough for my dad in her mind. Then one day, she surprised me. After meeting my SO for the first time, she told me, "Well, I didn't expect to like him, but I did. He looks at you when you speak, listens to what you say, and responds in a way that shows genuine interest." That was it. That's all a guy had to do in order to impress my grandmother. I'm slightly horrified that she didn't see those qualities in any of the other men I brought home. That happened 6 years ago, and my SO and I are married now, expecting our first child. According to my girlfriend, I won over her mother when I helped her grandfather get up and down after a surgery and offering to stop by and help him out for a few weeks. I just thought I was being polite. As a brother with a sister who has had a pretty awful selection of boyfriends, there has only been one who has impressed me. He didn't make some huge gesture or do me favors or try to win me over. He cared about her and stuck around. It took a while, but that's the only way he was ever going to get any trust or admiration. My now husband, David, and I met online and were in a long-distance relationship while I was in college near Duluth, Minnesota. We had never met in person before, and I invited him to come see me. I told my mom about the meeting, and she was really paranoid. Call me every day so I know you're alive type of thing. He came, and we really hit it off, and we were having a lot of fun. After day 2, Mom was convinced that he at least wasn't an axe murderer, and after a couple of more days, I decided that I was into him enough that he should meet my parents. I know, poor guy, but this was a good thing in the long run. So I invited them up on that Saturday. They picked us up and we all went out to lunch and made some polite conversation, and we decided we should take a small trip to Split Rock Lighthouse, a famous lighthouse on Lake Superior about an hour from Duluth. I remember that I left my camera in my dorm, so we swung by so I could pick it up. I left David in the car with my folks, alone for just a few minutes. While I was gone, my dad joked, "Quick, let's drive off," to which David, who has a very sarcastic dry wit, responded, "I knew that one way or another this trip would end with me dead in the woods." There was a shocked pause and then my parents started cracking up. When I returned, it was clear the ice had broken, and they relayed what had been said to me. My mom was like, "I think he'll fit right in." She often related the story, characterizing it as the moment she decided that David was right for me. Luckily, I agree. I am a white American man married to a Japanese woman. Here's the story of how I won over her dad, then got him to hate me, then won him back. While we were dating, I was living and working in Japan, and I won over her dad because I could tell puns in Japanese, his favorite style of humor, and because we shared common interest in films and music. We also just got along well in general. However, he was very old-fashioned, and so my then-girlfriend opted to not ever tell him that we were officially dating, even though it was obvious. My company ended up transferring me to Canada, so my girlfriend and I decided to get married in a hurry so she could go with me. When we announced this to her dad, his eyes instantly turned red as he realized his daughter was leaving the house and the country. Tearfully, he asked me what my plans were for my career, how I would take care of her, etc. Somehow, none of my answers seemed to please him, and the night ended with me feeling like I had screwed up pretty bad. He didn't speak to me for more than 3 weeks, and I knew he resented me for taking his daughter. Then my parents and 3 of my siblings came to Japan to be there when we signed the legal marriage documents, even though we were planning to have a real wedding 1 year later. Both families got together for a fancy, and my family saved my butt. They brought gifts for my future in-laws, told stories, jokes, and treated them like royalty. My future in-laws loved my family, and by the end of the week, I was newly married and my new wife's father treated me like a son of his own. We have gotten along famously ever since, and I credit that all to my amazing parents, brothers, and sisters. Funny end note, we had a real wedding 1 year later at my home in Chicago. My wife's father's speech ended up being the highlight of the night. It went something like this, paraphrasing. 150 years ago, Admiral Perry of the U.S. Navy came to Japan, pointed his ship's cannons at Tokyo, and demanded that Japan open itself to the West for trade. In much the same way, James came into our lives and pointed his cannons at my family. But just as the U.S. and Japan came to be close allies and friends, so too has James grown to be a close friend and member of our family. Everyone told me it was the best part of the wedding. My parents are pretty traditional and really like the idea of any potential boyfriends asking my dad's permission to date me. However, after 3 years of undergrad, living away from home, and inevitable casual boyfriends, they had kind of come to accept that this was not going to happen. I made this joke after a one-night stand made it clear he wanted to date me. We went on a few dates and things were progressing well. However, I was surprised one day to hear that my father and brother were coming to visit the city for a day. Turns out this guy had contacted my brother on Facebook and was taking him and my father out to lunch to ask permission to date me. This one-night stand is now my husband. My son's girlfriend won us over by helping us bring him back to dressing like a human being. Despite being an olive-skinned, thanks to my distant Italian relatives and my wife being Hispanic, middle-class boy from the suburbs, he dressed like a hardcore rapper. He looked ridiculous, as besides everything else, he was almost 6 feet tall, so sagging pants and shorts would have to be elephant-sized to work. I'm not sure why he went through that phase, as even during it he was fairly well-mannered. There's a lot of other reasons, not least of them being that she is the daughter of a childhood friend of my wife, and thus for the same ungodly remote town she's from, current population 150-ish. I cajoled and demanded, and he didn't change. She batted her eyelashes, and he did. She won him and us. This is a story from my significant other's parents. It was first year of university, and it's still summery outside. Every night for the first week here was drinking and partying on the quad and in the dorms. Well, at the time, I had met my significant other once in the hallway, and that was it. Well, one night, she goes out and gets blasted because her previous boyfriend was always partying despite her protests. Well, she nearly died of alcohol poisoning that night. She was rushed off to the hospital for detox and such. I had no idea this happened. I only saw the ambulance pull up to my dorm building. The next morning around 5 a.m., she was knocking on my door still inebriated from the night before. I didn't understand anything she was saying because she just kept saying she woke up in a room, locked to a bed with needles in her arm. In a thick Slovakian accent, too. She failed to mention that she was at the hospital. So I let her in my dorm, sat her on my bed, made her a cup of Earl Grey, and put Tarzan on my telly and had her watch it. Then I slowly tracked down her phone, wallet, and keys she had lost all over campus the night before. Then I bought her a giant 2-liter bottle of water and food. I brought her to her room and gave her the food and then some Advil. She told her parents all this, and they were very happy someone had helped her. Later that week, she started inviting me everywhere, and we eventually became best friends, and then even more than that. Well, Christmas break rolls around, and she left before me to go skiing with her family. I was texting her asking where she and her family were skiing. They were at a mountain not far away. I asked her how happy she would be if I came the next day. She was thrilled but thought I was blowing hot air. To her surprise, I was at her lodge the next day after a 12-hour bus ride. She couldn't believe it, and her parents were impressed that I went through all that trouble. I spent the next 3 days skiing and going to hot springs, and then I bussed back to the university to finish my last final. 3 years later, I am still with her, and her parents still highly approve of me for all the things I do for her. Not a parent, but how I won my in-laws over was pretty harrowing but funny. My wife and I knew each other for years, but having done the long-distance thing, I didn't meet her family until we eloped. I met the in-laws the day before the wedding. Due to the madness, though, I didn't get to know them until a short while later. Visiting them for the weekend, my wife's mom said that I could help myself to anything in the fridge. Me, my wife, and her brothers went out drinking, and when I came back, they urged me to take liberties with any leftovers, which I, of course, had no problem with. Stumbling upon a bag full of bacon, that was equivocal to manna from heaven. Unbeknownst to me, though, mom-in-law had cooked it in preparation for one of her kids' graduation parties the next day. I had the misfortune of seeing her wake up, walk to the fridge, discover that I had eaten all of her bacon, and start bawling. She was so stressed about the party that this was the straw that broke the mother-in-law's back. It was my first real impression on her, and I done screwed up. The rest of the fam was really cool about it and assured me she would get over it. I felt terrible about it, though. The next time I visited them, I didn't say anything about it. Still too fresh. But I wore a shirt I made that had big bold letters saying, "Sorry I ate your bacon." We've bonded over the trauma ever since. This story is an example of what good communication can do for a relationship. I don't know about when it happened for sure, but the moment I honestly felt accepted by my significant other's family was when we had just gotten back from our very first road trip together. We drove to Miami from Houston and stayed at SeaWorld Hotel next to Universal Studios. Anyways, I was having a beer and shooting pool with her dad and grandpa when suddenly her dad looks at me and says, "You know, you're the first boyfriend to make it through a vacation with my daughter and still be in love with her when you get back." I wasn't surprised after the trip I just had, but he was right. I still loved her and that had only grown through the past vacation. He asked what the worst part was, and I told him it was when my girlfriend, his daughter, had wanted to do something and I told her no, because it wasn't a good idea. The look of utter shock on his face was unexpected, and then her grandpa chimed in, same look of shock. "You told her no?" Then her dad goes, "And lived?" Then they started laughing, and instead of asking me to get the beer, her dad handed me one. I felt respected a bit, and at the least accepted as a man within her family. Clarification on girlfriend's behavior. The reason for shock was that she had never had a boyfriend that stood up to her. They were glad I wasn't a pushover. That's all. Her mother also commented to her, she told me about it after the fact, that I had the patience of a saint. Her actions on the trip. First off, let me explain a bit. My significant other is a very high-strung individual who has had traumatic events take place in her past. No, I won't go into any more detail. She has a script now for high anxiety, legitimately attained after blood work, and has regular meetings with her physician. So, imagine being with a still relatively new boyfriend. We'd only known each other for about 6 months, away from home, and on a very busy freeway that passes through small towns in backwoods Alabama and Florida. Very stressful for anyone. But throw in the fact that she wasn't yet on medication for her imbalance, she was having a rough time of things. Metaphorical example of the problems we fought about until we both broke down and had a heart-to-heart at the end of the week, which is where we calmly sat and discussed what was really bothering us. We are standing in a field of yellow daisies. Sunny out. Good mild weather. When she would decide the daisies should have been tulips, and that it's my fault we didn't find the right field. Again, metaphor showing how pointless the fight was, and I did not help the situation at all. When dealing with things that bother me, especially if it's someone I care for, I will put up a wall of jerk. Seriously, I get mean when I'm frustrated. She's anxious over nothing and thus adds to the storm. Not pretty. We are now settled in quite well and have been together for 3 years, living in the same apartment for 1.5 years. Yes, sometimes we fight over silly things, but in the end we always find a solution to the problem and then put it into action. She's learned that when I do voice a no, it's because of a good reason and no longer questions it. In turn, I show respect and do the same. If it confuses one of us, we ask later when we're at home and calm. I love this woman, and I'm secretly working on a way to propose to her. That is all. I hope this guy marries her. I'll tell you the story of how my husband won over my dad. My dad was I was about to say, my dad was a sailboat. Reddit. What's your best, no time to explain, let's go story? I'll start. Happened back when I was 16 to 17. Was hanging late one night at an out-of-the-way basketball court with 3 of my very attractive female friends. We were just shooting some hoops and talking when someone suggested a game of strip basketball. The 3 girls wanted to be on a team together, so they told me I could go choose anyone I wanted for my second. Naturally, I bolted for my high school's basketball team captain's house, pounded on his door at 10 p.m., sweating and out of breath, and said, "No time to explain, let's go." I didn't know him very well, and he had no reason to go with me, but we were both happy he did. The girls weren't happy with my choice, but they kept their word, and we got a nice show. Your turn. A few years back, my brother pulled up to my house with a paintball gun and told me to get in. He hands me the gun and says, "You'll know when to shoot." We go on a short drive to a corner where some kids began to egg his truck. I knew when to shoot. My archaeology crew and I were stuck in La Paz, Bolivia because of civil unrest that cut the roads leading to our dig site. We had been hanging out in La Paz for 2 weeks, trying to stay as warm as possible and waiting for any opening in the demonstrations. The Bolivian army fired into a crowd, killing several demonstrators, and both sides called a truce for 24 hours. That morning, our professor ran into our rented apartment and yelled for us to grab all our gear. We have 5 minutes to leave. We had no idea what was going on. The prof took the next combi, and my poor Spanish skills meant I couldn't ask questions of my fellow passengers. We boarded one of the first combis out of La Paz and headed out to the Altiplano. On the road, we passed huge roadblocks, burning tires, piles of broken glass, and various debris with just enough room for a small car to make it through. We made it far enough to hike the remaining 12 hours to the site next day, and then we started digging. Went to a bar with some friends and my parents in my hometown for my 21st birthday. Turns into a good 6 hours of drinking. Went to the bathroom, and while closing the lid after finishing, the entire bottom of the bowl shatters. I was legally drunk for my first time at said bar, and proceeded to urge very loudly that we needed to leave.
No, I don't think you understand. I destroyed a toilet. Let's go.
A group of bigots named Homo Sex is Sin visit Georgia Tech about every year to tell everyone why gays will burn in hell, women engineers are witches, blah blah blah. When I saw they were in front of the student center, I ran back to my place to find my camera and stereo. My friend was passed out right next to both items, still hungover from the night previous. I shook him and said, "Put on the smallest boxers you own and follow me." This is what happened. What follows is a link to a video where the two men are dancing in their smallest boxers in front of the bigots, set to techno music as a crowd cheers them on. Godspeed, you beautiful people. When I was 8, my parents took me over to their friend's house for an early dinner party. They had a daughter my age who was also my friend. She was really into animals and nature, so she wanted me to go with her about a block down her street to investigate a bird's nest she saw earlier in a tree. We go, she starts climbing while I'm on the ground watching. Then, about half a block away, this hippie-looking surfer dude with long blonde hair and wearing nothing but shorts walks out of his house and notices us. I notice him for about 2 seconds and then look back up in the tree at my friend. Next, I hear a loud whistle, and when I look back in the direction of the surfer dude, he has his shorts down around his ankles with his willy whacker out in all its glory. I yell, "Run!" My friend is clueless, but somehow she manages to jump out of the tree and we run back to her house as fast as our pint-sized legs will carry us. Luckily, my dad and her dad were right inside, and when I yelled, "There's a naked man chasing us," they were outside almost immediately. They find the surfer dude standing right in front of their driveway. I remember my dad saying, "Hey man, are you pulling your pants down in front of children?" And the guy responding with something like, "Screw you, man," and then walking away. The amazing thing is that we called the cops and they came over to file a report, but they recommended not pressing charges because the guy knew where we lived and might seek revenge. This was back in the mid-1970s. Hurricane Charlie. Was going to do a normal ride out the storm situation and play video games and eat junk food all weekend while it rained outside. I got a call from a buddy who said the hurricane just turned 90 degrees and made landfall in Sanibel, like 20 to 25 miles away. I rushed into my roommate's room and said, "Grab 2 days worth of clothes. We're getting the heck out of here." When we came back to the house, it had been destroyed. The roof leaked and held water in the ceiling until it completely caved in, completely destroying everything we had in there. Not sure if this counts, but I was in high school and espied a hot girl waiting for the bus. Being me and knowing I would just awkward all over myself if I tried things the normal way, I got on my best panicked face, ran up to her, and said, "Quick, quick, there's no time, I need your phone number." She blurted it out. I actually kept it in my head until I could get it down on paper and called her that night. We've been together for 13 years. I own a skate shop, and it was also a popular hangout for skater kids. I was off one day, and I get a call from an ecstatic skate kid that sounded in panic saying, "Get to the shop now!" Click. I rushed down there 2 minutes later. Anthony Kiedis walks into the shop. One of the kids had run into him in town and convinced him to come into the shop. All the skater kids are in my shop behind the counter with my employee, pretending to work on things, put skateboards together, etc. It was hilarious to see them try to act naturally, and we all got to have a good conversation with Anthony Kiedis about skating, paddleboarding, and kiteboarding. He signed a girl's skate deck for our Wall of Fame that I still have. He's been back every year since then and is a regular customer. This past summer, I delivered paddleboards out to his vacation home. For the uninformed like I was before I read this post, Anthony Kiedis is the lead singer of Red Hot Chili Peppers. And now, it's time for a pheasant tangent. Got a phone call from my sister one evening, and when I picked up the phone, she was clearly running and out of breath. I could just make out her saying, "Open the front door," before the line went dead. So I ran to the front door, picking up the heaviest thing I could find along the way. It was a climbing helmet. Wrenched the door open and moved out the way just in time to see her bolting into the house past me. I slammed the door and wait for her to catch her breath.
There was a giant pheasant chasing me all the way from Tesco.
Don't worry, ma'am. I've got this. With that, I donned the climbing helmet and told her to call the police if I wasn't back in 5 minutes. When I was a kid, my village had an evil jerk of a pheasant that would chase old ladies down the street. You could look out of the window and it would be strutting around the village square waiting for a pensioner to attack. Anyway, one day I was out in the garden with my dad, who was plucking a dead pheasant, and this devil bird jumped up onto the high fence and looked at us. I'm not kidding when I say it had the craziest look in its eye. I asked my dad to use my water pistol to blast it, so he pumped it to full power and shot the pheasant in the chest. This crazy bird just gripped the fence for the entire time it was being savaged by the jet of water from my Super Soaker 2000. It didn't fall off, and only flew off of its own accord about 10 minutes later. Then a day later I saw it dead in the road. When I was about 13, my buddy and I rode our bikes to the local Kmart to be bored, obnoxious teenagers. Real quick, this story is from 11 years ago, so oh my god, I feel old now. Anyway, tossed some Nerf footballs over the aisles, ran around, mocked things. Then I thought it would be funny to spray my buddy with the perfume sample. He didn't think it was funny at all and started chasing me. I ran and hid, and the hunt was on. Using his finest ninja skills, he snuck around until he saw me, crouched down in the hardware aisle. He crept up behind me, put his butt right next to my head, and let rip. He turned around to gloat and it wasn't me. Just some poor schmuck looking at hammers. The next thing I know, he runs by me. We gotta go, we gotta go, we gotta go. I was in high school, and my friend came running up to me and said, "No time to explain. I need your shoes." I spent the rest of the day walking around the school in socks and some makeshift shoes made out of a cardboard box. I later found out that the reason why my friend needed my shoes was so that he could participate in his chem lab class and not fail due to his not wearing shoes. Me and my friend are heading to Sonic for lunch. Suddenly he screams, "Pull over!" pointing across the road and across 2 lanes of traffic. Why? No time to explain. Go! So I hit the gas and barely avoid getting creamed. Across the way, I see what he noticed first, a man holding down a woman in the dirt near the ditch beside the road and striking her. We start to get out, he sees us, lets her go, and gets in his car. A moment later, another car pulls up and some older women swarm over the struck woman as he begins to drive away. We hop in our car and give chase. I hand him my phone, he calls the cops. We end up leading the way on a car chase with officers slowly assembling en masse behind us. Finally, we chase him to a house and block the driveway with our car as he gets out and runs behind the house. Knowing we have no right to chase, we let the police take it from there, but we checked the car. It had kids in it. The police interviewed us later, told us that the kids belonged to the woman, and if we hadn't followed the man, they might not have found the car. Felt like big heroes. Best part was, on the way home, we helped the fellow with the broken radiator, and in the middle of getting him taken care of, the police called us after they caught him, and I got to say this awesome line. "Bro, that was Officer X. They need us down at the station." Broken radiator guy was all, "Who are you?" My brother is 11 years older than me and stayed with my dad with my parents divorced, so I never really got to live with him when we were young. When I was about 14, he barged into my room at 4 a.m. and told me to pack your crap for 4 days. Our flight leaves in 2 hours. Soon after, I was on a plane. Turns out he had planned us a trip to Colorado to go snowboarding and told no one but my mom 1 hour before he told me. My dad working in the World Trade Center heard a huge crash several floors above him. Boss looks at him and says, "No time. Let's go." He lived. About 11 or 12 years ago, I was taking my dog for a walk in the forest behind the local elementary school. He seemed all anxious to get off leash, so I unleash him since I figure he wants to run around and pee on everything. The moment I let him off leash, he starts barking at me. In hindsight, my best guess is what he was trying to convey was no time to explain, let's go. And then he bolts. I'm ticked off and start chasing after him, but he was fast, even by dog standards. Turns out on the other side of the woods, there was a middle-aged guy who had exposed himself to a group of young girls. They ran away screaming, and he was trying to make a grab for one of them. It was at this moment that my dog came bursting out of the woods like Lassie or Rin Tin Tin or some crap. My dog was popular among the kids, so they knew him. They screamed his name and ran towards him. The pedo bailed, with his Johnson still hanging out of his pants. I was fully prepared to reprimand my dog for being a jerk. Then I found out what happened. He got steak for dinner. Freshman year in college at a school in Boston. Sick as a dog. Newfound ROTC friend with similar taste as myself comes running into my room and tells me he needs me. I tell him I'm sick and can't go anywhere. He refuses my denial and forces me to come with him. Flash forward 45 minutes in a car, and we are arriving at Gillette Stadium. Turns out there is a Halo 3 tournament being held for Army recruitment purposes. He is very aware of my Halo skills due to the sleepless nights we spent when Halo 3 first came out. Ended up placing second, and along the way beating Jared Mayo. He was physically upset and said he wanted to kill me. Felt awesome to beat a professional football player at something. All of this occurred in the box seating of an empty stadium, which we have an amazing view of. So surreal. Army recruitment via Halo 3? Are we fighting the Flood? Is Area 51 home to the Flood?
Wake up, sheeple! The government is hiding aliens under our freaking noses!
My wife and I went to Scandinavia in the winter for our honeymoon. First Copenhagen, then Helsinki, then northern Finland. Yes, this is an odd choice. Our flight got diverted, and en route to Copenhagen, our luggage, including all of our winter gear, was lost, and the airline was unable to locate it for the 4 days we were in Copenhagen. However, we made friends with one of the customer service agents at the airport. We returned to the airport on the day of our flight to Helsinki, still with no luggage, and dreading the Arctic cold we were about to fly into. Temperatures were in the single digits in Finland, but unable to do anything about it. Magically, we found our luggage at the airport that morning and went through security to our gate. It was about half an hour before boarding when our friend from customer service on the other side of the airport ran out to us and said, "Follow me and don't ask any questions. We don't have much time and there is something I must do for you." Then he led us through a series of back hallways in the airport to his office. "What I'm about to tell you, you must tell no one else," he said. "In 20 minutes, our pilots are going to announce a strike, and all our flights will be grounded." This was in no way public knowledge. He put us on another flight to Helsinki with a different airline, and we watched in gratitude and amazement from the Finnair terminal as the strike was announced, and our original flight, along with every single other SAS flight leaving Copenhagen, was grounded. Epilogue: we found ourselves in Copenhagen again a year later, and we went to the airport specifically to try and find our friend and thank him, but it was his day off. I'd ask Reddit to pass on my thanks, but I'm pretty sure what he did was against company policy, and I wouldn't want to get him in trouble for doing a good deed for a young couple. I was at a house party over the summer that started going a bit south, so my friend and I decided to just get in the car and drive home. We got to the car and were waiting for the third guy in our group when a very, very drunk guy came up with his red Solo cup of beer. We were friendly to him, asked him what he was drinking and all. He decided the best reaction to this was to throw the beer at me while I sat in the car. After this happened, I noticed a group of about 7 or 8 more drunk people ambling towards the car. They did not look happy. My friend decided the best response to this was to go to the back of his car, grab his shotgun and 2 shells. Oh crap. He stood next to his car with the drunk people slowly approaching and yelled at them once, "Get away from my car," while loading the shells. They did not stop. He fired once into the air away from them, cocked the gun, and said again, "Get away from my car." About a third of them left after that, so he fired once more and the rest scattered. He had just fired a gun at a house party. Twice. Oh crap, oh crap, oh crap. Our friend then came out of the house screaming. No time to explain, let's go. We never went back to that house. TLDR, nearly drunken brawl broken up by shotgun. Walking home from playing football in the park, and my dad, aggressively speeding down the road in his car, brakes hard next to me. He looks angry as heck, and my little brother is crying, and he sternly says, "Get in." I roll with it, and he speeds around the park looking attentively out the window. My little brother points at a group of lads, maybe 16 to 17 years old. One of them is running with my little brother's glasses. He's only about 10 years old. My dad jumps out of the car, rugby tackling the lad to the floor. My dad is huge, and the lads look petrified. My dad absolutely bawls at them for about 5 minutes, and after that, he gets back in the car, and then we go to McDonald's. Dads out there listening to this right now, if you aren't willing to body slam someone for your kid, what are you doing with your life? I was at a sporting event with some friends. Wow, it was 10 years ago. Now I feel old. The bleachers were metal benches on concrete and set up amphitheater style, going down a hill and all the concessions and bathrooms on the top of the hill behind us. It's about halftime and I'm thirsty. I also see that it's starting to cloud up. I tell my friends I'm gonna go grab a drink and be right back. I walk to the top of the stairs and I see the biggest, nastiest thundercloud I have ever seen, and it's about to crap bricks right on top of us. I hauled it down the stairs, grab the friend closest to the aisle, and yell, "We gotta go." It takes a second for it to register, but everyone grabs the important stuff and then follows me up the stairs, across the food court, and into the bathroom. Suddenly, the temperature drops by at least 10 degrees. The wind gusts. The last friend in almost lost her hat. Seconds later, we hear a huge clang on the tin roof of the bathroom, and then another, and then another. Then out the door, we see golf ball to orange-sized hail everywhere. TLDR, I saved my friends from being caught in bleachers in a nasty hailstorm. It was the middle of the night on a road trip with a friend. She's a city mouse, I'm country. I was driving, she was sleeping, and I started to get sleepy. So I pulled off the highway onto a barely paved road and followed it for a while until I found a wide shoulder to pull off. I parked and we got out so she could have a cigarette. There were loads of stars and we leaned against the car having one of those hushed middle-of-the-night conversations. Then I heard rustling in the woods 8 feet from us. At first I ignored it, but then I realized there was a pattern. I'd hear it at the 10 position, then at 2, then back to 10. It was more than one thing making the rustling noise, and they were getting closer. And I realized something was hunting us. So I put on my power voice and told her, get in the car. Her eyes got wide and she hopped in really quick. I jumped in and we took off back to the highway. She turned to me and asked, was it an axe murderer or something? I told her no, it was probably wolves. And she got mad at me for scaring her. She didn't see how wild animals stalking us could possibly be dangerous. Doing some bodywork on a Cessna 350 when my buddy comes running into the shop with his eyes nearly bugging out of his head. Goldfish, come on, follow me. What is it? I'm busy. Just come here. I have to finish this work. Is it important? Just follow me. It's important. I'm not going unless you tell me what it is first. Cake! Turns out it was somebody's birthday at work and there was free cake in the break room. If somebody could take that cake soundbite and turn it into Space Core from Portal, I would love you forever. So, I had a job driving a taxi, night shift. I'm waiting in the cab lineup from my next fare when a native Indian stumbles up to my taxi, asks me if I want to buy some beer. No thanks, pal. You sure? I'll sell you a case for $15. Keep in mind, I'm in Canada, and a case will normally cost around $40. I say sure, and he hops in and tells me to drive around the corner to the golf course. I'm skeptical, but I go for it. We arrive, and he runs into some bushes and comes out with a 24-pack of beer. I laugh, pay him, and ask if there's more. Yeah, if you buy 10, I'll sell them to you for $10 each. I gave him $190 more. He runs towards the bushes, looks back at me, and yells, "Well, you gonna come help me with them or what?" I follow him to the bushes, and there is a skid full of cases of beer. We take 19 more and load them into the back of my taxi van. I get the nice gentleman's phone number for next time, and we say our goodbyes. Fast forward 15 minutes. I've driven home. It's 3 a.m. I was living in a house in a row of townhomes. Neighbors surely hear me pull up, open and slam my door. I run in, wake up my roommate, and yell, "No time to explain, let's go." He rushes downstairs, puts on shoes, and follows me back to the cab. I open the rear doors and his jaw drops. "Where did you find this?" "No time to explain," I respond. So here we are, my half-naked friend and I running 20 cases of beer from the street to my house at 3 a.m. I am amazed that no neighbors had awoken and looked out their windows and called the phone number on the van. When we finished and I had time to explain, my roommate gave me $200 and we went and got another 20 cases, this time from a skid hidden behind some trees at a park on a local lake. TLDR, bought 20 cases of beer from an Indian, woke up roommate at 3 a.m. to help rush it into our house. We built a wall between our kitchen and living room with cases of said beer. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, linked at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot, linked in the description too. Either way, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.